The Survivor Specialists are back, and we are continuing our Survivor 50 coverage. And today I'm joined for the first time by Clyde from Survivor Analytics, who's jumping in. This was his idea. This ranking here was his idea, and I'm so happy he came up with it because I was telling him before we went live here, I like to shy away from player rankings sometimes because you never know. But then when he said it, I was like, that is the best podcast to do right now. We know that the players pretty much just got back from Fiji. Or coming back today, something like that. And I'm like, let's rank them based on their skill. Sure, let's do it before we actually watch them on 50. So, Claude, I'm so happy to have you here and so happy that you came to me saying, let's do this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Phil. I'm super excited to do this. I know rankings can be super controversial, but I'm excited for 50, even though Jeff might not be particularly excited for 50. I don't know if you saw that video that came out this week. He's either tired or just over it after dealing with 24 contestants.
I love that you're reading into that as much as everybody else. I've been seeing the online conversation with, is Jeff just done? Did he not like this? I saw some people being like, well, I guess a woman wins this season. I'm not buying it. I just think that they put Jeff on the spot and said, here you go, make this video and go. I think that, look, you have to think, if they were doing double tribal councils, like I think they probably were for most of this, 26-day shooting schedule, this thing was probably nuts. So I think Jeff's just exhausted. I think that's what it is. I don't think he's bummed on the season.
To be fair, though, those tribal councils have incredible characters there. Like, Jeff doesn't need to put in as much legwork to get the tribal councils going. Like, right now on our podcast, we're watching Survivor Panama, and he tries so hard during every Lamina tribal council because there's just nothing to talk about with them. I feel like at least with this season, he can kind of just sit back and let the players go and they'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, the Lamina tribals, that's like Blake's least favorite tribe of all time. But Panama, I think right now he has number 2 in his ranking through the first 20 seasons because he loves the Kasaya 6 so much. Yeah. But he always says, get rid of the Laminas. They couldn't get rid of them fast enough. And the fact that it's Terry who's left at the end makes it good. I do have to address this. Willie D says it right now. No spoilers, LOL. No spoilers, okay? If you start reading things on the internet, if you start thinking that you're getting hints, I'm seeing the word medevac here. I don't want to know. I doubt half of it is true anyway, but don't start putting Survivor 50 spoilers in my chat when we are July 1st. I don't need that right now, okay? Yeah. I want to go along for the ride as much as I can. And Willie D also hits us with this, currently smoking a cigar, sitting in a pool and watching the Specialist. Doesn't get any better than this. It's thunderstorming bad where I am right now. So that's why I look like I'm in like a cave. I don't even know. I can't get the lighting right, and I have to be plugged into the Ethernet here at my parents' house. So we're having a time though. This is going to be good. Clyde, how do you feel about spoilers? You try to stay away, right? Come on, please.
I try to stay away. I do a lot of content ranking the contestants based on how likely they're going to win. So I'm always sending out my predictions. I was also on the Joe bandwagon for this past season, which did not turn out well for me. But because of that kind of content that I make, I feel like it's kind of my duty to avoid spoilers at all costs. And I think I've only been doing this for around 2 years or so, but I quickly learned that it's kind of a lose-lose situation where if I'm right, people claim that I look up spoilers. And if I'm wrong, people say I'm an idiot. So there's real no winning in this
Welcome
business.
To the Survivor
I try
community.
To stay away.
Yeah. Welcome to the community, man. I've been doing this. We hit our 10th year in December. That was our 10-year anniversary. And I'll tell you, I put out a video, I think it was for season 45 or something, where I had 3 of the final 4 right or whatever it was. Man. People were like, oh, so you just read the spoilers. You just did this. I'm like, I literally said D was going to win because she was from Miami and I was living near Miami. Like those were the reasons that I was going with. It wasn't anything big brained over here. It just so happened to work out that way. So it's a tough place because then you do get the people in the comments sometimes. I don't know if you get this as much, especially on TikTok, you probably do, but you get the people in the comments who are so confident that something's going to happen. Like, I'll bet you. Because they read a spoiler somewhere. And I will say for season 48, a lot of people thought that they had correct spoilers. And there'd be a lot of people who would say, I'll show you on Monday night. I'll be here to make fun of all of you. And those people never came back to comment on the podcast again. So
yeah, what was the rumor for 48?
I think the rumor for 48, I'm not sure, but it seemed like people were so confident in Joe that it wasn't just, oh, I think Joe's getting the edit. It was people speaking as if it was already a done deal with Joe.
Okay. Because that's why I bought into Joe. It was mainly the edit. It was one of the few seasons where I felt like all of the strategic arrows were pointing away from him towards Kyle, but we just got such an egregious amount of Joe content that I couldn't pivot off of him.
Yeah. Hey, that's how Blake was. Blake said, not was it 98.6%. That's
Man.
what he said. Yeah. Yeah. And I just sat here and I said, guys, I think it's Kyle. The whole time I kept saying Kyle. Kyle won, and I got to rub that in a lot of people's faces, which is really what it's all about. I know you said you've only been doing this about 2 years. When I started and we were doing the Co-Wrong as our third full season, I jumped on the Michelle bandwagon so early.
Really?
Oh man. And I was relentless. Every week we would do our power rankings and I would just put her at number one. And when she won that season, that was such a great victory lap. There's no better feeling when you're actually right. So stick to your guns, right?
I'll give you credit for it. You need to credit Joe, though. The fact that he ate too many meats on that season. I do feel like that, plays a large role.
What people also forget, though, is you have to also credit Neil's knee, because if Neil doesn't go out there, Aubrey's the merge boot. She's done.
Yeah. And then we probably get like a Scott, Jason, Julia final three. Yeah.
We get the nightmare final three that makes the internet explode. Although, hey, Kyle Jason, very underrated character. I tried to get him onto a second chance 2 ballot last season, and the fans weren't having it, but I was having it. I convinced myself he's a good choice. So, how do you want to do this criteria based? I know we talked about we're going to player rank them. We're going to go by skill, right? Like how good of a Survivor player they are. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I did it based on skill, but I also account for legacy. So if you've competed multiple times and if you've shown that skill over multiple seasons, that's going to hold more value for me. I'm someone that in general, I don't place a lot of value into placement. I think that's something that some people might disagree with. I think it's possible for you to, get second place on Survivor and not necessarily be the best player. I think it's possible to win a season of Survivor and not be the best player, just because it's a game that has so much luck involved. You can get you can get swap screwed. The person you're targeting can get an advantage. Like there's so many variables in this game that I personally don't look at placement too much, but all that's to say that I'm looking at both the accolades as well as the repeatability of their gameplay.
Yeah. I love the repeatability is a big one that I feel like Will loves to talk about on this channel. He always talks about how many seasons can this person win? And I think what's tough with this is, as we're ranking these players, and I found myself as I was putting my ranking together here on my notebook, I was having a hard time with the new era versus old school, because to me, the old school players are better players for the most part, especially because we've seen them multiple times. I mean, you have people like Colby and Ozzy who almost won the game twice, right? You have Sari who almost won the game, you could argue 3 times. Like you have people down the line who came close a lot, but how are they actually going to be in the new era? So are they still as good of players? That's what I was having a hard time. And then what do you do with the winners of D and Kyle? Like, is Kyle the best player from his season? Is D better than Emily? I think with D and Emily, it's pretty obvious, but I think with Kyle versus Camilla, there's an argument to be made for Camilla. So I was having a hard time with that. I was.
I'll be excited to talk about the two of them, because I disagree. I think there's a pretty wide gap between Kyle and Camilla specifically. Also with D and Emily, but we'll definitely get into it. Do you want to start at the bottom and kind of work your way up from there?
Yeah, we'll definitely start at 22, because we don't know Savannah and Rizgod, so we're not doing anything with them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, unless when Rizgod inevitably wins the season, then he'll be number 1 overall, right?
I'm telling you, like I feel bad. Like Rizgod's probably like listening to all these podcasts and he's like getting excited. He's about to be a full year of Survivor. And I've just been like, I don't care about this guy. He's going to get 23rd place. He's done. I don't care. And look, I could love him on 49. People are always like, you're sleeping on Rizgod. I'm like, and the producers at Marvel are sleeping on me as a director, right? Like, but they're not sleeping on me because they don't know I exist. So I don't know who this Rizgod guy is. It doesn't matter to me. So I've been hard on him. Blake and I have a casting episode coming out tomorrow on our Patreon. We always do casting perspective. And normally we're talking about reality TV casting, Survivor casting, all that. But we said, you know what? Screw it. Let's just do a boot order. Let's just do it. The season just happened. Let's just do the boot order for 50, the two of us. And so we sat down and we did the boot order, and it comes out tomorrow. And here's your spoiler. Here's your teaser. But I have Rizgod in 23rd place. So
I think that's too harsh.
I can't help myself.
Like for any other returning player season, the person who played the season immediately beforehand, did they ever get voted out first? Like Russell's the first one that comes to mind. He goes far. Rupert has a good run on All Stars. I'm trying to think Who else
James
falls
Amanda
into that
have good
bucket?
runs.
Yeah, Malcolm on Karamoan. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying Rizgod's going to play amazing, but I think sending him out the door first might be a bit harsh.
Can you hear the thunder as it's happening? Or is that coming through or no?
No, I can't hear it.
Okay, good. It's shaking the house. So I'm hoping that my internet holds up. But look, I just can't help it. And you know what? Here's the other thing. Colby, Sari, Stephanie, Coach are all on this season. They were all on a season with Russell where nobody knew what that was going to be like with the person who they knew nothing about. And they've all said, Coach said, Colby said, because obviously Sari and Stephanie didn't play with him. He said, if they knew what Russell was all about, he's the first person voted out of that season. No questions asked. They don't even think about it. So maybe there's a little bit in their head of who's this Riz God guy. And I just want to hear Colby say, I think about working with Riz God. I just want to hear those words. That's all I want. So, we'll see.
Yeah, there's so many people I want to see work with Riz God. Mike White is at the top of my list for who I want to see working with Riz God, just because I think they're the youngest and oldest people on the whole cast.
Yeah, Riz God's younger than everybody by a significant margin.
Yeah.
Significant. But we'll see what ends up happening with him and Savannah. We've been doing an Everything You Need to Know About series, a defining episode series. We're going to put their episodes out after 49. We can't do them now. And I know that Riz God is big into the online reality games and everything like that, but I just have to sit here and I don't know. I got to take my shots before I fall in love with the guy. I can't help it. When after season 49, when I'm like, I'm most excited for Riz God, you can all come back and look at me and make fun of me for how I was talking about him back in July of 2025. So, all right, we're going to start at the bottom. I agree with you about placement doesn't always matter. Because for me, I think Jonathan Penner's an amazing Survivor player. His placements are pretty bad, right? Like his placements aren't that good. But I think he's great at Survivor. So that's what I'm looking at here. However, I do think 22nd was so easy for me. I didn't even struggle an iota because it just fell into place. But, I don't know.
22nd was easy for me too, but I feel like we're not going to be on the same page based on what we've talked about so far. I have Q.
Well, you have who?
I have Q at 22.
I don't have Q much higher than that. I won't say what place I have him, but I don't have him much higher than that. Let's hear why Q at 22.
I think I got Q last because he's the person I'm least confident in actually wanting to finish the game. He's the only person on this cast that is asked to be voted out. And for me, that's like an automatic disqualifier. And I do think there are some positives with him. He's not someone that's going to get targeted early on based on physical strength. He's going to help out in the challenges. He's proven he can work in a majority. He was kind of towards the center of that Yanu tribe on 46. All of that is great, but he just hasn't proven an ability to actually want to stick it out. He is the only person here to ask to get voted out of the game. And I think he kind of blew up his own spot in the early merge. He burns his alliance with Tiffany. He tells people about Idolicia. So I don't know. I love Q as a character, but I just don't think he has a lot of potential on any random season.
I feel you on that. Look, like I said, I feel like we got to go 24, 23, 22. Otherwise, we're going to be jumping around so much. They're not going to, the audience is going to have a hard time keeping up. So I won't say where I have Q yet, but Q is in my bottom 5. Okay. So he's coming soon. I went with his tribe mate, though. I went with Tiffany at 22nd. And here's my reason.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Tiffany is a popular pick right now to win or go deep at least. And I am not saying this ranking is totally based on everything we have seen before 50. I'm not saying this is how well I think they could play in 50. I'm not saying that I think Tiffany's going to be out in 22nd place. Tiffany could do really well on this season, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. But if you're looking at what everybody else has achieved in the game of Survivor, Tiffany has achieved the least out of everybody on this season. She was voted out with an idol in her pocket. She is the worst placing person, which I know we said isn't going to totally dictate everything.
That's what I was going to say. We just had the conversation about placement and player quality, and then you have Tiffany last.
But in this case, I feel like it makes sense because when you talk about, well, what do we replicate? How replicable is the game? What is Tiffany even really replicating? She was an ally with the eventual winner of the season. That was really it. I think that Tiffany should take this as a compliment, though, because this could mean that she's the winner of this season. Like, truly, she could win 50 because most people are probably looking at Tiffany as the 22nd most threatening person coming into this game. But I just think that if you look at the resumes of these players, it's got to be Tiffany. It's got to be Tiffany.
I will agree that I do think she's walking into the season with potentially the smallest target on her back. I think the people at the top of that list are either her or Jenna Lewis. And that's no shade to Jenna, but I think you might have some new era contestants like Q who don't even know who Jenna is. So I feel like she will not have that huge target because of her placement. But I'm definitely higher on Tiffany than you are. Do you want me to kind of say my placements for those contestants, or do you just want to go down number by number for the whole thing?
I think we should just go number by number, and then when a duplicate comes up, we can say, okay, so this is where I had this person, right? Like I had, you're going to, you have Q at 22. When I get to Q, we can kind of discuss that out. But I feel like it makes sense to kind of go one at a time. Otherwise, it will be a little too jumpy, I think, and then it kind of gets hard to follow. I should probably have the ticker going across the bottom right now, but honestly, that's hard to keep up. And I'm so terrified that this storm is going to put my power out that I'm more prepping for if I need to start using a hotspot or something. I don't know. But so you go Q at 22. Look, again, Tiffany, I could see winning Survivor 50. More than I could see a lot of players who I have ranked ahead of her. But coming into the season, to me, she is the worst player coming in. That doesn't mean she's the worst player coming out.
Yeah, I think it's important to make that distinction between player quality and likelihood of winning the season as well, because I'd say that the top 4 people on my list are towards the bottom in terms of who I would pick to actually win the whole thing, just because they have reputations going into it all, and that's going to have a major impact on it, especially if the trends that we saw in like Game Changers follow through to this season. Am I good to go on to 21 then?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, at 21, I got someone from a season that I absolutely adore. I have a bunch of friends from school that are just getting into Survivor right now, and they're watching Survivor David versus Goliath. So I'm getting all of their text updates as they're watching it for the first time, which is a lot of fun for me. So with that in mind, at 21, I have Angelina, and it pains me to put her here because I think she's potentially the best character from Survivor's 30s. I enjoy her presence on screen more than Rick Devens, which might be a hot take to some people. And I do think she's proven, some game ability. She can adapt in the game. She makes that alliance with Nick and Mike White during the swap, and they end up going to the final 3 together. But I just don't think she's someone that's very aware of how others perceive her. And that's shown throughout the entire season. She, asked Natalie for the jacket. She says that the rice negotiation is a moral act. And then she keeps trying to bring it up as a way to gain favor with other people. But for me, like the biggest knock against Angelina is the fact that her poor positioning never actually translated to people wanting to take her to the end. Because sometimes you'll see contestants who are kind of these goats, and everyone's trying to drag them to the final tribal. Someone like a Jake in 45. And I don't think that was really the case for Angelina. I think her alliance of the Goliaths in the early post-merge constantly threw her under the bus as a backup target or the decoy, even though probably anybody beats her in a jury vote. So I feel like she has that really rough combination of a lack of win equity, but that doesn't mean that she's brought into the alliance to begin with.
I have her in the exact same spot. She was the only one that I was thinking about putting below Tiffany, but I feel like the internet would have killed me if I put Angelina at 22. But again, this goes to if Angelina finishes 3rd place on this season again, I'm not surprised. If Angelina finishes 5th place on this season, I'm not surprised. But when you're looking at what did Angelina do on her season, she had a lot of memeable moments. That's what Angelina did on her season, right? She made it to the end. She was the star of a very, very, very good season. One of the best seasons of post 20 for Survivor, for sure. Maybe the best season from there. However, she didn't ever have the chance to win the game. She's a 0 vote finalist. She's a 0 vote finalist against another player who's sitting here right now, who I have to rank higher than her then. And I do think, though, when you start looking at what has changed in these people's lives, everything that has changed for Angelina makes Angelina a better Survivor player. But I haven't seen that in action. So I have to rank her at 21. I don't know what she's going to be like as a wife with 2 kids, who's more settled into what her life is. I can assume it's going to be for the positive in her game, but I don't know that. So I can only go based on what I know. So I also have her at 21.
And I think that's another aspect that makes the ranking so difficult is that a lot of these contestants, especially once you get to the old school ones, they're just different people than they might have been the last time they competed. So it might not always be fair to Angelina that we're judging her based off her actions. And what year was that? Like 2016 that filmed for 37?
20, yeah, it was 2016 or 17, because then it aired in the even odd seasons air in the spring or in the fall. So it was fall of 2017, right? No, 2018. It was 2018. It was fall 2018.
So filmed summer 2018 then. So
Yeah.
It might not be fair to judge her based on the actions that she had 7 years ago, but that's all we have right now.
Yeah.
So, but I will be rooting for her.
Yeah.
Who do you got at number 20 then?
Yeah. So I have Stephanie LaGrossa. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm way higher on Stephanie than you are then.
Here's my thing. I rewatched Palau not too long ago. Over on the Patreon, we've been going through a season a month, right? And we've been putting out podcasts, and we just got to Heroes Villains. That's what we're doing right now. And when we watched Palau, I watched that season for the first time as like a podcaster, right? Because I had seen Palau so many times back in the past, and I used to watch the old seasons just for, throw something on TV. Some people watch Sports Center. I would throw on episodes of Survivor. And I'm watching Palau this time, and I'm going, wow, Stephanie LaGrossa is an edit queen on this season. Like, it is all edit that makes her what she ultimately became in the Survivor world. She's bad. Her tribe loses every challenge, but she's the one who seems like she's trying the hardest. Therefore, we're rooting for her. Her strategy isn't great, but she's a badass woman who is taking down or at least competing against these guys. She's the last one remaining on the tribe. She's got to be America's sweetheart. She's all that. She comes in. She doesn't really do anything once she hits the merge because Kobe's an easy boot for everybody, and then Janu quits. Then she comes out and plays Guatemala, and she loses to somebody that many would consider one of the worst winners in the history of the game, 6-1, and doesn't play a social game that gives me any confidence in her moving forward. And then she comes out for Heroes Villains, and she scared the daylights out of me. And that Heroes Villains game is so fresh in my head because that's the season we just watched. Man, I know that there's a lot against her there, but I said this on the Everything You Need to Know About Stephanie, and I'll say it here. She's from the same part of New Jersey that my mom and my aunt grew up in and everything like that. And they all have very similar personalities of just like, F you, I don't care. This is how it's going to be. And when I sit there and I see Stephanie, I don't see her ever turning it off. And I don't feel like she turned it off just because she's married and wealthy and has kids now. I feel like she's probably a more extreme version of Stephanie because she has no reason not to be. Her life is golden. So I think Stephanie is doomed the second she walks on that beach.
See, I feel like that FU persona might be, I don't know, appreciated a lot more in the new era than it was back when Heroes versus Villains filmed, or especially when Guatemala filmed. And I don't hold the social game on Guatemala too much against her in the grand scheme of things, especially since it was the first captain season. I think her and Bobby John were both walking into that as like, dead people walking. I don't think either of them could have won a jury vote. But I will say I'm way higher on Stephanie. I'll give the glass half full on Stephanie later on the list. That might not be till, top 5 for
me. Okay. Okay.
We'll see. My number 20, though, is someone that was voted out way earlier in the season. We mentioned her briefly. It's Emily Flippin, the financial analyst. I got to respect it since Survivor Analytics is our title. But for Emily, I just don't know what version we're getting from her. Are we getting the pre-merge Lulu disaster Emily that called out Bruce on the boat? Like, Emily didn't handle it well when there was a person that competed on the island for 12 hours. And now she's going to do well when she's surrounded by people that are all returnees. So I don't know if we're getting that version of Emily, or are we getting the post-merge version of her where, yes, she's able to kind of rebound, reintegrate with those Reba players, but it's not like she was running the show by any means. She was kind of just being dragged along by that alliance as a number. So I do think there are those positives with her. She is adaptable, and she seemed like a strong social player by the end. Like, I don't know if you feel this way, but I get the sense that Emily beats most people on that season in a jury vote. And I don't know if that's because of her social game or just because of the underdog story that we saw with Emily.
To me, that feels like the story more than anything. And that's just like from watching the seasons and seeing how it's edited and seeing how that goes. I do feel like Emily's was more of the story that was being told. She actually almost fits into the Stephanie LaGrossa kind of thing where it was this disaster tribe. She seems doomed from the start. She finds her way in. She plays a good game. She finally gets a little bit of power and goodbye. She can't help it. So I'm going to get this out of the way real quick. My 19 is Q. My 18 is Emily. So two people you've already mentioned. So I just wanted to jump ahead here since they are the next people I have on my list and I can talk about both of them. Emily, I wanted to put Emily higher. But again, it's kind of like with Stephanie. When I look at Stephanie's first game, because I do focus on first games more than other games, although with this kind of thing, and that was a power surge. So if the power goes out, you just keep talking.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, please do. But when it comes to this season, I do have to look at those second and third games. What did they learn? How did they develop? How did they act? Emily's cast adores her. So I know that she's very likable and that could help her. But I feel that Emily might have the biggest target on her back for no reason entering this season because she didn't do anything really on her season other than the Bruce move. Emily didn't have control over anything on this season. So I have her at 18. I wanted to find a way to put her higher. I couldn't. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that and then I'll get into.
Well, so why do you feel like Emily has a big target on her back? I never got that sense going into 50.
I think that because of her story and because of the arc that she had, it's kind of that human arc. Christian almost has it a little bit too, although Christian played idols and did a little bit more. But it's this feeling of this is such an underdog. This is somebody who really adapted to Survivor and kind of dominates screen time a little bit in a season that makes people think they're better at Survivor than they really are. And when you think about like coming into this season, nobody's really looking at Joe as a threat because he's a 0 vote finalist who got beaten down. But if Joe doesn't play this game with Eva, I think Joe is somebody who could easily get the votes. He's likable. He does all these things that he checks a lot of boxes. And I'm going to get to that when I get to him. But with Emily, I don't feel like she checks as many boxes, but the legend of Emily almost makes it seem like she checks more than she does. And I think people are going to be looking at her as she can be strategic. She can be threatening. And it's like, since when, as Rob Cesternino said?
I think I probably agree with you. Emily's also probably hurt by the fact that she was cast more as a character, at least in my opinion, than one of these strategic masterminds. And Jeff in production missed out on a lot of the great characters of the new era. If Emily was there with the Carolyn or I'm trying to think of some of the big names. Oh, like a Shan from 41. Mm-hmm. If there were some of these other bigger characters around her, I think Emily could hide in the background. But based on who they picked from the new era, she might get pushed forward because of it. So I do see what you're saying there. I don't know. The other thing I'll throw out with Emily and kind of my last note on her is everyone remembers her big move being the Bruce blindside. And she kind of blows up right after by taking credit for it. But when I look back on that and kind of analyze the strategic layout of that season, I don't know if the Bruce move was even good for Emily in the first place.
Exactly.
So it's all, like you said, how the edited presented it. And I don't know. I just don't see things going too well for Emily. You gave your 19 and 18 placements. Did you already do your 20th?
I did. So Stephanie, so I go Tiffany, Angelina, Stephanie, Q, Emily. And just to get into Q here, I think when it gets down to it, I do think Tiffany's the worst player on this season just because of how things went for her. I don't think when I tried to do this, I tried to be, okay, here's the pros and the cons about the game they played. Not the game they could play, but the game they actually played. Yeah. There weren't a lot of pros for Tiffany. Aligning with Kenzie was a pro. Finding the idol was a pro. That was really it. And she wasn't around for a lot of the crazy strategizing that starts to go down. Q, I get what you're saying where it's like, can he get through his season? I know that somebody came on our podcast and I forget who it was, but they said, I don't think Q should be on 50 because he wanted to quit. And that worries me because, we've seen people come. Colton Cumbie comes back and quits a second time, essentially.
Yeah.
So not essentially, he quit Survivor twice. So when I look at Q, I get that, but he also was such an integral part of what that season was. And he was used to being the decoy vote, and he's played that way. He's also played from a power position. He also found an idol and got burned with an idol just like Tiffany. But I feel like he can learn from that a little bit more. And I think that maybe it's looking at it the wrong way, but the reason why I actually put Q ahead of some of these people is because Q, if he leans into what made him so memorable on his first season, he goes further in the game this time, which is not the case for a lot of players, because Q becomes somebody that you say, let's just drag him along. He's not going to get votes. But then if he can actually start to strategize and almost pull like a Tony post Winners at War merge, where it's like, whoa, why did we let this guy get that far? Q might be able to do something. Now, he's no Tony, okay? But that's just the example. Mine. So I have him at 19. It's not like I have him all that high. He's the 4th lowest person I have on this cast, but still, that's where I go with him.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about other players wanting to drag him along, but how many people also fall into that bucket? Like Q's probably in that category, Coach is in that category, Joe might be in that category. So I feel like at a certain point, the contestants are going to look around and say, we can't drag 5 of these people all to the final tribal council. We need to cut some of them. And I wouldn't be surprised if Q is higher up on that list, especially since he's fresher in their minds competing on 46.
That's a good point. That's fair.
So I got my number 19, if you're ready to hear it.
Yeah, go ahead. 19 and 18. Do them however you want.
So 19, I got a player that is probably a legend of Survivor's 30s, but I just don't think he's very deserving of that title, and that's Rick Devens. I'm pretty low on Devens compared to the general fan base. I think he's someone that got completely saved by a twist that was outside of his own control. There are some positives I have written down. He's a good challenge performer. He won 4 individual immunities. I think he's tied for the record for most idols found in a single season.
I think he has the record.
Oh, it's just him. Okay. So he has 4 idols on that one season.
I think he got one too from production, which is what puts him over the top.
Oh, like when he came back from EOE, they gave him one. Okay. So it's the same thing they did with Chris that season, where you get back in the game and you get a free trinket to go with it.
Which is crazy that Chris got that, but that's not for here, right?
Oh, it's still absurd. But
yeah, he holds the record. The only person who tied him is internationally, which is Miles from this latest season of Australian Survivor. So I don't count that for this.
Oh, okay. Did you see that season of Australian Survivor?
I did.
Okay. I haven't been keeping up with Australian Survivor.
Okay.
It's tough. It's just a lot of content, a lot of episodes, a lot of non-elimination episodes. I have so many people online saying that they want me to cover it, but maybe I'll do it for Australia versus World.
Look, I started doing it on the Patreon 15 months ago. I was putting it off. Last March, I said, fine, I'll put out episodes every Friday, and I have 1.5 seasons left, and then I will be all caught up. And what do? They fire Jonathan LaPaglia. So here I am. They fire the host as soon as I catch up. So we did watch something.
That's something I want to bring up in the intro too. Jeff was so down and sad in that opening video, and that came out, I think, within a couple hours of JLP getting fired. So I thought maybe it was the pressure of realizing that there's another great host up for grabs for US Survivor.
That's true. And a little bit younger too. Not much younger, but a little bit.
But I wouldn't be opposed. People always say that who are they going to fill that spot with when Jeff retires? I think he'd be a great pick.
I agree with that. Jonathan's a phenomenal host. Jeff is still better. I don't care what anybody says. Jeff is the GOAT at hosting a reality TV show, but Jonathan's great. He really is.
Is Jonathan a producer as well, or was he exclusively a host?
As far as I know, no, but I don't really follow Australian Survivor the way I do US. I've been binge watching. That's all I've been doing. So, yeah.
But, okay, we were talking about Rick Devens, right?
Yeah.
Last major positive I have with him is I do think he's very aware in the game. I don't think he had a very repeatable approach of making it to the end by just challenge beasting his way and playing idols all the way to the final tribal. But at least he was smart enough to know that he was on the bottom and kind of adapt his game accordingly. But at the end of the day, the cons just kind of outweigh the pros for me. It's the fact that he got voted out, and his threat level management on that season is atrocious. I think he's the top target on the board every round starting at the final 8. And when you look at a lot of the winners in Survivor history that people generally don't respect as much, the people like a Mike Holloway or a Ben Trebergen, these people that just immunity'd their way to the end, they're always criticized, yet fans always hold Rick Devens to this really high regard when he kind of had the same approach as them.
I don't really criticize those winners. And so I have Rick Devens a lot higher than you. I don't have him like your Stephanie LaGrossa chaoticness, but I have him pretty high because Devens is somebody that I actually think is in a perfect spot coming on to this season. Yes, he's going to eat up confessionals, but I don't think people are looking at him as all that good of a player because he's the 4th person voted out of his season. But when you look at how that season shook out, he was on the disaster tribe to start and then had the unluckiest swap in the history of Survivor. And when he came back into the game, he's well liked, but you're right, his threat management was terrible. He also didn't really have a chance to manage his threat level, though, because everybody knew that he won his way back into the game and that was going to be a good story at the end of the day. So I feel like coming into this season, there's people with better stories. There's bigger targets. There's people that if I'm out there, I'm looking at as bigger threats than Rick Devens. And you brought up the 4 immunity challenges. Most people wouldn't think of Devens like that, though. Most people, I don't think, would picture him as a challenge beast, especially when you have people like Joe and like Jonathan who have proven themselves in the new era to be challenge beasts. So I think Rick Devens might be able to slide right down the middle and just be likable and get himself further. But I'll talk about that when I get there, because the middle tier that I have here is a bit of a mess, and Rick Devens is in that.
Well, and on the topic of the challenges too, I think Devens will benefit from the fact that he's won a lot of challenges in an era that's very close to the new era. He hasn't competed in the same ones as Joe and all of them, but he's familiar with the format. People will talk about Colby, and I'll probably talk about Colby as a challenge beast later on, but he won challenges back in 2001. Yeah. And a lot of those challenges aren't even in play anymore. So,
yeah, no, that's again where it's so hard to rank these people, because you're ranking. We haven't seen Jenna Lewis since season 8. I can't say she's a great player because she doesn't even know what an idol looks like. So that, that's what's tough. I agree with you. And the challenge stuff does come into play as I start talking about, some of the nitpicking that I have to do as we go. So who did you have at 18?
18, I got a new era player. I got Jonathan from 42. Similar to Devens, I think he's great in the physical department. Way more physically apparent that Jonathan is a challenge beast than Devens might be. I always have that image of him in the water, in the pre-merge, dragging his tribe to shore. I think they're the only group that actually finished that challenge. So I think he's someone that will definitely stick around throughout the entire pre-merge, unless his tribe is just dominating in challenges and they realize they don't need him anymore. But outside the physical side of the game, I don't really know what Jonathan brings to the board. Like, of that, he was on it's Taku, right? Was the name of that tribe.
I don't remember names, but I think it was orange.
I know it was orange. I want to say it's Taku. But out of that Taku 4, I think Jonathan had the least amount of win equity. There's that tribal council where it's the split one, where he has some comments towards Drea. And I think from that tribal council forward, his chances of winning the season were absolutely tanked. So I don't think there was really a world where he could have won 42. And I just don't have a lot of confidence in Jonathan, building relationships with other contestants to the point where they want to vote for him on the jury. He can get into a majority alliance, which will count for something. But if you don't have the social game to go along with it, I don't see him winning it.
Yeah, I have him a little bit higher. So James Barber here says Lindsay was ripping his social game on RHAP today. If you listen to the Survivor 50 Files with Brandon, I actually think, though, Jonathan is a player who benefits from a more old school cast, because I think that, Jonathan being on a tribe with Colby to start, Jonathan and Colby are going to hit it off. I mean, Jonathan's close with Mike Turner, and I think he hangs out with Boston Rob, from what I understand. So,
okay.
I think I could be wrong on that, but I feel like they've definitely hung out because they're both kind of in that same area of, Florida Panhandle, Alabama. You're as close as you can get there if you're in Gulf Shores. So I do think that he might have some equity there. Now, I don't have Jonathan much higher than you, really at all. I don't have him in the next spot, but a little bit higher. I do understand, though, the frustration, but what gave him the nod over the next person I have is the physical portion and the fact that he played in the new era. The next person I have is an old school player who hasn't had to do anything in the new era and isn't that good at challenges, or probably won't be anymore. So that's why I have Jonathan ahead of them. And Jonathan carrying the ladder for me is enough to get him into almost the top third, or top 2/3. Almost, not quite, though.
Yeah. And as a side note, the fact that he's the only person from 41 through 44 is absolutely ridiculous. If you were to ask me before 50 came out who they would take from those 4 seasons, I would probably go through like 5 to 8 names before I get to Jonathan. And that's, no shade against him, but I'm just surprised because there's so many great characters from that section of the new era.
They dropped the ball on the new era casting, and I've said that so many times, but they were 11 people from 5 seasons, and one of them we haven't seen is just absolutely silly. I don't like that at all. And so Yeah, Jonathan, you have Jesse, Carolyn, Jam, Carson, Shan, Ricard. I mean, you keep going. Oh, and Jake's not there. Jake was 45. I mean, you can literally go through the
Gabler.
whole
You didn't
43
even mention Gabler.
Gabler,
I would
Cassidy,
rather see Gabler
Carla
on the season. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think a Gabler return would have been fun. He probably wouldn't have been one of my top like winner picks to come back, but I think it would have been something interesting, at least more compelling than Jonathan. I think I kind of know what I'm going to get from Jonathan on the second go.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. So let's have you do your 17 because my 17, 16 is going to be easy.
So 17 for me, I mentioned David versus Goliath earlier, so I've been able to kind of relive the memories with this contestant. I got Christian, which is painful because he's another elite character, someone that I would want to do well on 50. But similar to Devins, he just really struggles with threat level management. And it's that constant like double-edged sword that we see on Survivor where he is so likable to the point where it actually kind of works against him. And people don't want to go far into the game with him. I think he needs an idol on that season. There's also a round where he needs an immunity win just to get 7th place. He doesn't even make it to the finale. And props to him because he's still this iconic character. But I just don't know if he'll be able to go onto the beach and kind of take that step back out of his overall like Christianness. Like he's the type of guy that just can connect with such a wide range of people. And while that will give him a lot of different strategic options, that doesn't mean that people will actually want to go deep in the game with him. So that's what probably my biggest concern with Christian. But for the positives, he has a ton of win equity. If he sits in the end against anyone on David versus Goliath, he wins that season. And I think that's something you need to credit him for. I also think he's a more adaptable contestant. He was someone that was willing to kind of work across original tribal lines and align with the Goliaths. So I think he's someone that we could see some interesting strategic plays from. But at the end of the day, when you get to that final 8, final 7 range and people are looking left and right and thinking, who can I beat in the end? No one's going to look at Christian and say, I can take this guy far. So
yeah, I agree with that. And I'm happy that you put Christian at 17 because I have him low, but you have him lower. So now everybody can be mad at you and not me because I do feel like
I'll take the heat.
Christian's one of those players. Again, I brought it up with Emily, though, where I think that people overrate how good at the game he is just because of how great of a character he was, right? Like James Clement's not a top 10 Survivor player, but he might be a top 10 Survivor character. There's a big difference between those two things, though. And I think Christian toes that line a little bit because he is so cerebral and he is nerdy and he has he can think about things with the breath first search and all of that. And he has a successful idol play. I haven't watched Dave vs. Goliath in forever, but he does have a successful idol play. No, he does, right?
Yeah. I know Davey plays the idol on him at final 12, and I think he has the successful idol play at final 8 where Gabby goes home. But that's also a negative in the sense that even his number one ally in Gabby was willing to turn against him. So,
yeah, knowing he's a threat. Exactly. Yeah. So again, I have him a little bit higher, but I hear your sentiment here. And I think some people might be looking at Christian as he might be top 5. If he might be the top 5 most excited you are for a player, but he's not as good of a player as a lot of these other players on this season. So I'm going to go to my 17 and then I'll hit my 16 since you already mentioned my 16. My number 17, a person that I could easily see winning this season. And I know that it's become like a massive point of conversation on X already of who they are suddenly following on social media. Because could this be the final 3? And it's like, or maybe you just come home from Survivor and you just start following the people you just spent 26 days with one way or the other. It doesn't matter. Again, not going to look too much into this stuff. But I have Jenna Lewis as my number 17. And
okay.
The thing is, she almost wins All-Stars. If she sits at final 2, she wins it. But at the same time, she never had the ability to make anybody flip on Rob and Amber. Her first season, she's a nothing. She gets asked back because enough people said no. That's really what happens. She plays a compelling game in All-Stars. Yeah, I mean, Colleen, Elizabeth, they both said no. Jenna fits into both of those. Jenna and Amber are kind of like the last 2 additions onto that cast, and they're 2 of the final 3. So when I look at Jenna, so much potential coming into this season, but she's never played with idols. She wasn't even on a swap really because she was more in like that, oh, my tribe got decimated. Saboga kept losing challenges, so they go and go to a different side. she hasn't had to play aggressive survivor. She hasn't had twists and things been thrown at her really. And really in All-Stars, it was better for her that she got swapped or whatever you want to call it, because her tribe was a sinking ship. And she came in with the easy plan of let's get rid of the winners and all of that. But that's not going to be there this season. I think she's adaptable, and I think that she can win this season. But if you're looking at, she's never been a challenge beast. She's now 22 years older, she's 24 years older than she was the first time she played. So she's not going to be a challenge beast now.
I think it's the biggest gap in the history of the show between appearances. Yeah.
Yeah, it broke Ethan's record, which was 32 seasons. It broke Ethan's record, which was previous. Or I guess Ethan and Amber tied the record there, but it was 32 seasons. And so when I look at Jenna, I'm just like, I don't have enough information about how she's going to play Survivor 50. She could still win, and I put her higher than some people because her win equity in All-Stars was legit. And in Borneo, she was one of the few Pagong people who was actually thinking about it as a game, but I can't put her any higher than 17.
Yeah, I'm much higher on Jenna than you are.
Okay.
She's in my top 10. But I will say, despite me being higher on Jenna, I don't know if she wins All-Stars if she makes it to the end. Like, she has those 3 locked votes, the Alicia, Big Tom, and who am I missing?
Lex.
And Lex, who wouldn't vote for either Rob or Amber. But I don't think the Rupert vote is an absolute guarantee in Jenna's pocket.
I think she gets Kathy though.
Oh, you do? Even if it's against Boston Rob, you don't think the Marquesas connection would be enough?
I think that Kathy was so torn at that tribal. Again, a lot of people don't realize they had to pick Rob or Amber, so they got to vote for somebody. I think it's an easy decision for most of that jury if it's Jenna versus either of them, because they can say, Jenna, we don't really like you, but we hated these two.
Yeah. So you're right. She probably does win that season. I'm way higher on her. I'll give the pro Jenna speech later on. Okay. So she was your 16, you said?
She was my 17. Let me do my 16 real quick. I have Jonathan, which I already talked about.
Okay.
He's so physical. He made it to Final Four. He probably doesn't win. He doesn't beat Marianne on that season. Maybe he beats Mike Turner. I don't know. But I feel like Jonathan, because of how good he is at New Era challenges, and based on the fact that we're probably going to get a lot of double boots on this season, he's so valuable. I'm looking at Jonathan as same thing kind of as with Jenna, right? Jenna, I don't know what she's going to do on 50 because I don't know how she's going to play New Era. Jonathan, I know how he's going to play New Era, and I know how this season will fit him. A lot of other people have the similar mentality. They're going to need him for challenges early. He doesn't start to become somebody you look to vote out until maybe 15, 16, 14, something like that. So I think that Jonathan has to be higher than some of these other players. Still 16, not super high, but I feel like a 4th place finish on a pretty crazy season, so good at challenges on a season where challenges might be more important than ever. I got to put him here.
And it's funny because I feel like 48 got a lot of flack for being the season where all the big, strong players got together. And there's a real possibility that the same thing happens on 50. I'm not rooting for it to happen, but if you're going to have 3 tribes with the double tribal council every week, and you cast people like Joe and Colby and Jonathan, these figures that are already prone to aligning with the other challenge beasts, it's a realistic possibility. And I thought that might happen until that Jeff Probst video dropped this week, because if that video came and Jeff was, jumping out of his boots, then I'd be thinking that would happen.
I'm telling you all, he was just tired. They probably hit him when he's barely been sleeping.
I got my 16. We can cue the eagle screech sound effect. I got Coach here. And this is tough because I feel like Coach has probably one of the most dominant strategic games in the history of the show, winning or non-winning. I think his run on South Pacific is very impressive. The way he was able to really just take hold of that Upolu alliance in the post-merge, convince Cochran to flip over to his side, keep his alliance loyal with some, questionable methods, we can say, but it's a very strategically dominant performance from him. The issue there is that I think that's kind of the best case scenario that we can possibly see from Coach, where he's surrounded by this cast that was willing to kind of buy into that religious ideology around him. And I just don't see that happening in a future season. I think it's way more likely that when Coach comes back on 50, that it's similar to his Tocantins or his Heroes versus Villains run than the South Pacific game. And I just think Coach lacks that element of self-awareness. like the fact that he goes into that final tribal and he's not willing to own up to his deceptive play style is super concerning for me. And I also feel like we kind of saw a modern version of Coach in Joe on 48, where Joe's different in the sense that you don't get all the fun character moments. I don't think he fills up the airtime as much as Coach does. But Joe was similar in the sense that he really valued the honor and morality of his game. And that wasn't respected in the final tribal. And I don't think for a season like 50, we will see a jury that wants to award someone with that mindset. I think you'll need to play a good strategic game and you'll need to take ownership of that game. It's a similar jury that we saw on Winners at War. So I love Joe, the character, but I had to put him here at 16.
But you put Coach here at 16.
Oh, yeah. I put Coach here at 16. Yeah.
Go. I have Coach a little bit higher, mainly because of the things he learned from one season to the next. His Tocantins game was just a clown show, and it's one of my favorite performances by a player of all time. It's so funny. The Martyr Approach is my favorite episode of Survivor in the history of the show.
I love it too. Yeah.
And then you get to Heroes versus Villains, and Tyson teaches him a lesson and says, dude, you got to chill. And Coach takes that to heart. And we see that in South Pacific. He takes it more seriously, but he doesn't know what to do at Final Tribal. But if you think about it, Coach elevates, even though his placement on Heroes versus Villains is worse, his game is better. He's learning. And then he comes out, he puts it all together in South Pacific. And if he goes to the end, obviously they had Redemption Island, so Aussie's there. But if he goes to the end with any other duo from his original alliance that doesn't involve Sophie, he wins the game. Like, he beats Rick. He beats
You
Brandon.
think so?
Oh, yeah.
I think he loses to Brandon. Maybe he beats Rick. I thought Brandon was like one of the biggest jury threats on that season.
No, I don't think people like Brandon.
Really? Okay.
I think it was a lot of hot air. Now, I haven't rewatched South Pacific in a while. That's coming up in 2 months, and I'll be rewatching it. But I'm not really. I don't think so. So I think Coach. I have Coach a little bit higher. Again, middle of the pack. This middle tier. When we get there, it's so nitpicky. But I have Coach a little bit higher here than where you have him. Who do you have at 15?
15 is someone that you mentioned earlier. I got Tiffany here. So she's middle of the road for me. And I know she is the lowest placing contestant on this cast, but I think there's a lot to be impressed with when it comes to Tiffany. I think you said earlier that all she did was align with the winner of the season in Kenzie. And I feel like that's kind of underselling her game because she was at the middle of that Yanu tribe. She was the one playing in between Q and Kenzie. And had they went to a tribal council with the three of them, I think Tiffany's the one calling the shots. I think she's the person who gets to pick who's going into the post-merge as a duo. So I feel like we saw Tiffany excel when everything else was crumbling around her. So if she's on that disaster tribe that we always get in the new era, she can survive into the post-merge. But I do think she struggles with keeping her allies loyal. It's similar to Christian, like we talked about earlier, where in the early post-merge, we get confessionals of Kenzie saying, maybe I got to flip on Tiffany. And when Kenzie decides against it, everyone else on the island says, well, maybe we got to flip on Tiffany.
Yeah.
So I think she's someone that commands respect, which is good if she makes it to the end, but it causes everyone to see her as this major threat. So I'm definitely higher on her than you are, but she's middle of the road for me.
Yeah. Again, I just go back to like, there's so much conversation about what Tiffany can do and what she could be, but in terms of what I saw Tiffany actually be, I just don't buy it right now. I'm just look, again, she come out of this season as the winner, and we come back and we do these rankings again after the season and we say, okay, what's your movement look like, right? Like, who did you move up the most? Who's now coming out of this as the best? And the best player doesn't win every season, right? Like David Wright, probably a better player than Adam. Adam just did what he had to do to get to the end and keep his threat level low to win the game. But right now, 22. That's it, 22. My number 15, this is just a pure, I need more information. This guy could end up being a top 10 player. And again, this could be another player who coming out of this season could end up being the new era legend. Could have put this person lower too, because it's 0 vote finalist. It's a 1 vote finalist. But I have Joe. I just have Joe.
This is 14 or 15?
15.
Okay, I got Joe at 14. So right around the same area.
So right around the same area. And my thing with Joe is I don't know what his game is without Eva. I don't know. So I can't put him higher. But in my opinion, Joe's coming into this game probably in one of the best spots out of any of the new era people because he's great at challenges and nobody thinks he's a threat to win the game because they just watched him get one vote at the final tribal. But if Joe can play a different game because he's not out there with Eva, we know that that's a one-time thing. That's not going to happen again. He plays something different. He's a lovable guy. Everybody on the cast likes Joe. He could beat anybody on this season. He could look, crazy talk, depending on who's on the jury and depending on the way the game is played, he could beat Sari. Like there's no saying he can't do that. If he's
I don't know if I would go that far. You need to have a very specific jury to get Joe beating Sari.
This cast could have it. So I'm just saying, I think that Joe, I need more information. If I watch him play on this season and he is a totally different, totally more aggressive player without Eva, this is probably a wrong ranking. But I think having Eva there just made him not really do anything. Everybody's saying, yeah, no shot. He can't beat Sari. You know what's great about this, guys? He's never going to sit next to Sari at the final three anyway, so I don't have to prove anything. Nobody can say I'm wrong because it's never going to happen. I'm going to run a brand deal until it happens.
Well, so I guess just to clarify your opinion on this, do you think Eva was bad for Joe's game in the long run?
Yes.
Or do you think they actually helped each other?
I think she was bad for Joe's game because Joe got complacent playing with Eva. And then when he got to the end, he's not going to go against Eva as aggressively as you need to go against somebody at Final Tribal Council. People were impressed with Eva. Joe's not going to start taking shots at her. So Joe ends up losing to her. I think that if Joe doesn't have that villainous side, right? Good for him. I wish I was like that. But I think that Joe ultimately gets maybe further in the game than he would have if he didn't have Eva. But he can't win playing that game with Eva. He can't. That was the shot he had, and we all know he would have lost to Camilla too. I think he probably loses to Shaheen. I think Shaheen wins that season. So to me, it just feels like he can't win that season with her. He can win the season without her, though.
See, I feel like Joe's excessive loyalty extends outside just Eva. Like, I don't think Joe was someone that wanted to flip on Kyle, unless he was absolutely forced to. Like the only way Joe would have turned against Kyle is if he won final immunity and then he's forced to pick between Eva and Kyle in that situation. I think he's someone that doesn't want to go against his true morals, similar to Coach, who I talked about earlier. And because of that, I don't see him gaining a lot of respect from the jury. And one of my bigger concerns with him is that when I watched a lot of his postseason press, I feel like Joe didn't learn many lessons on why he lost that season. I didn't see him saying, oh, I got to play way more cutthroat. I need to take ownership of my moves. I need to be willing to turn on allies next time I play. It felt like a lot of his postseason press was him saying, it's on me for losing, and kind of talking more in the tribal council, post NBA game press conference talk, where you kind of give non-answers to everything. So I don't know if I have a lot of confidence in Joe making that 180, playing that cutthroat game that we would need to see him play, which is a shame because I think he's probably one of the better social players of the new era. Not social in terms of like gaining respect from a jury, but social in terms of like rallying a group around him. Because I think a big reason why that strong players alliance does so well in the post-merge is because Joe's at the middle of it. He has David, who's loyal to him. He's got Kyle, who's loyal to him. He's got Eva, who's loyal to him. Like Joe, to me at least, felt like the thread of that alliance, and I could see him building a similar group on 50. So, especially with all the challenge beasts on this cast.
You know what the thing is, though? You were talking about his post-game press, and I have to think Joe knew he was going out to play 50, so he doesn't really want to reveal his cards, right? You don't want to say what you're doing.
That's a good point.
You know, Joe's a smart guy, and I think that might be where his head was at, was I don't want to tell people what I'm actually thinking because I know that I'm about to be on the island with them again. So that's where I'm at. I do think, though, that the one thing working in Joe's favor, and it might not necessarily make him a good player, which is why I have him at 15 and why you have him at 14, people are going to want to align with Joe because you know that Joe is going to be loyal to a fault. That's great in a cast full of people who are not. So if you can get to Joe first and make him feel the most comfortable with you, you want to play with him.
Let me see. Oh, sorry. I was just checking one of the last notes I had on Joe on the side.
Well, worth playing for. Just hit us with a super chat that says, tell Claude I like his content. So there you go.
Oh, wow. I'm honored. I guess Only other note that I had on Joe is I do feel like he can get a little bit paranoid. We saw it with the Shaheen vote. We saw it in the round where David goes home as well. So I feel like even though he knows how to put himself at a center of an alliance and put himself towards the top of the pecking order, that doesn't mean that he always uses that power effectively. So with that said, I don't hate the Joe casting. I think he will be interesting. I feel like I would have enjoyed the Joe casting a lot more if he competed on like Survivor 42. And then there was an 8-season gap in between where I felt like he could have learned a lot in between those 2 points. But I think it's very likely that we get a similar version of Joe that we got last time.
Yeah. I think we do, but I think that similar version could be a winning game because he's not playing with Eva. He can play a very similar game, but get with people he can actually beat at the end. And that we could see it happen this time. People forget too, Kyle's game was like so subtly dominant. And that's why either one of us has said his name yet. Like there's a reason for that, right? I'm going to do my 14 and 13 because it's two people you've already mentioned. My 14 is Christian. My 13 is Coach. So Christian and Coach here. I put Coach ahead of Christian by one spot, just like you did. You have it 16, 17. I just have it 13, 14. I think that Christian, again, we've kind of talked about him to death, but it's like he has a lot of things working in his favor. But can Christian ever win Survivor? Joe's got a better chance to win Survivor than Christian does, in my opinion. But Joe also has proven that he can go to Final Tribal and not get the votes. But that happens, right? Like that could happen and he could lose and then come back and win a different season. Whereas Christian would probably win the votes against anybody. But how does Christian get to the final three? How are they going to let him do that? So Christian has a lot of positives working for him, but I'm going to put him at 14. And then Coach, again, it's because of his growth. I put him at 13. I give him a nod over Christian. I put him almost in the top half here because Coach is somebody who has gotten better every time. Can he perfect the final tribal council speech? I don't know, but people might look at Coach as such a character and such a joke, air quotes, that Coach might be able to put himself in the position to give another final tribal council speech. Yeah. Not a lot of people you can say that about. So that's why I have Coach at 13, still on the back half, but a little bit closer to being a contender and one of the better players on this season.
And outside the realm of like just player quality, if we're talking just about performance on 50, Coach feels like one of the old school contestants that's still involved in the Survivor community. He's someone that might have connections to the new players. I know he plays a lot of music with Ben from 46. Yep. So maybe he has connections to people like Tiffany or a Charlie or a Q. And that might not be the case for a lot of other people coming from that era of the show.
Yeah, Coach taught Ben how to drive. So,
wait, really?
Yeah, Coach was teaching them how to drive. It's amazing.
That's adorable. Okay.
Yeah. So Coach, and like that's the thing with Coach too. Obviously, we saw character Coach. We saw character Coach. We saw character Coach. Coach is a really likable guy. And I think that's something that gets overlooked because he plays it up for the screen so much. And like, I'm not saying he's like Coach is Coach, but I do think that a lot of players who have played with Coach really like Russell Hantz likes Coach. Like a lot of people like Coach. And it's different personalities and stuff that get along with him. It's just, they would have given him the million if he would have argued well. He didn't argue well. That was his downfall. And that is something that's correctable because he's not Amanda Kimmel where he's coming out thinking, she's coming out thinking she won and doesn't realize what she did wrong. He knows he's had plenty of time to sit on it. So yeah, I put him at 13.
And I like that you have Coach and Christian back to back. I feel like Christian could fill up that Cochran role for Coach on this season because Cochran, I think, votes for Coach in South Pacific.
One of the only votes for Coach. Yeah. Let me see.
So
go ahead.
I could see the two of them working together, Coach taking Christian under his wing. And then if one of them sits in the end, the other person will vote for him.
He gets Rick, Edna, and Cochran. Yeah. And he didn't get Brandon's, which was like the surprising one. And that would have put him at 5-4. He could have been a one vote loss there. He was just never going to get Whitney, Dawn, Keith, or Jim. So he needed to get Aussie, and he didn't convince Aussie.
Yeah. Am I good for 13 then?
Yeah, go ahead.
13, I got Chrissy. And I feel like I kind of bounce around in terms of where I put Chrissy, and people might have different opinions on her depending on your outlook on forced fire making. I'm of the opinion that if forced fire making doesn't exist and Ben gets voted out at Final Four, Chrissy still loses the season. I think Devin wins that. And I don't know if it's that close based on what people have said after the show. And I feel like sometimes Chrissy's legacy is blown a bit out of proportion because people just automatically assume that she was robbed when that might not necessarily be the case. And with that said, like the reason why Chrissy is such a popular figure, I think, is because of the physical side of the game. She had those 4 immunity wins. It was a real tangible stamp on her resume that people could look at. But when I see Chrissy, I see Chaos Cass with a better social game. I think the two of them are very similar players, where with Chrissy, I think you can give her a lot of credit for her experience working in a more like dynamic strategic landscape. She has experiences playing outside the majority, but also in the core of it. I think she's left out in the early post-merge of Triple H. There's that whole situation where Ben is working as the secret agent between the two alliances. And even after that whole disaster, like Chrissy is able to form this new group with Ryan and Devin that kind of runs the back half. But for me, like the biggest issue with Chrissy is really that social side of the game. I don't think she wins that final tribal. And I don't think she handles adversity particularly well. When Ben, shows his cards and reveals that he was that secret agent, Chrissy kind of goes after him for it. So I like Chrissy. She's someone I will be rooting for, but I think she gets a tad bit overrated by the Survivor community just because people assume that she would have won Triple H.
Yeah, I have her at 12. So right around here. And I thought that was gonna, again, you're it's not that you're stealing my hot takes. I'm just glad that we're in closer agreement on some of this, because I do feel like there is the fan base assumption of who's good, and then there's who's like truly good. And it's kind of like going into All-Stars. Rupert's not a top 5 player going into All-Stars, but if you ask my dad, you better believe Rupert was the greatest player of all time going into All-Stars.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I put Chrissy here, and I totally 100% agree with you. It's 100% her social game. It is her social game. And people can say what they want to say. Ben just won all this stuff, so it was maybe a bitter jury or whatever. That jury did not really like Chrissy. That's just what it comes down to. They didn't really like her. And look, we have not seen a lot of people from her season come out and say Chrissy's going to win this thing, right? You look and you see D's season, everybody from 45 is saying, oh, my best friend's going to beat the crap out of your favorite. Sucks to be you. Nobody's doing that for Chrissy. And so I don't know what people's feelings are on Chrissy after the fact. Maybe nobody wants to give Chrissy $1 million anyway. So look, amazing challenge performer, phenomenal strategist. But you got to get the social part down. Yeah. You got to get it down.
And she's a hero, according to that season. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I forget what her job. It's some kind of business job.
She was an actuary, I think.
Yeah. The heroes of society, the actuaries.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But I'm surprised. I feel like we've been on the same page for a lot of these so far.
Yeah. I'm curious if our top will be a little bit different then, because this is disturbing me. I thought Chrissy coming in at 12, I'm thinking, okay, maybe he'll have the casual take and put Chrissy in like the top 5, but you didn't do that. Stephanie LaGrossa is the big one, because I don't know, man. I just feel like you forgot about her, so you just ranked her higher and are just like, I got to stick with it. It's in pen, but I don't know. I don't know about.
We still haven't seen Stephanie yet on mine. We got a little bit of time before we get to her.
Crazy. So, who's your 12? Because then we'll have done half the cast each.
Okay, so my 12 is Camilla. So recent contestant from 48. I do really like Camilla. She's someone that knows how to connect with the jury. It seems like she beats just about anyone on that season in a jury vote. So even though she was outside the majority for a large stretch, she knew how to build connections with those other people on the outside. I also think Camilla is one of the best puzzle solvers that we've seen in the new era. So even though people, when they talk about challenge prowess, there's this overarching focus on physical muscles and strength. I think in new era challenges, it's just as important to have people like a Christian, like a Camilla, that you can put at the butt of the challenge that can take it home. Because even if you have Jonathan giving you a massive lead in the first half, if you got Rome on the puzzle sitting there with one piece, you're not going to finish the whole thing. So I feel like Camilla could be really valuable in that challenge side of the game. And she knows how to lock down a number 1 ally. She had Kyle completely loyal to her until the very, very end, where, Kyle's true player quality came to the surface as he was willing to cut her. That's all great. But for Camilla, I just think she was really dependent on Kyle that season. And it's tough for me to say this because I think they're a really iconic duo. But based on the way this season was edited, it felt like Kyle was the one in the majority, calling the shots and controlling the game with the Joes and Evas in the world. And Camilla was kind of on the outside. And even though she was able to have that relationship with Kyle to the point where he would keep her in the game for a large stretch, it's not like Camilla was really at the center of what was going on. Like, the biggest move of the season in the Shaheen blindside was something that was primarily directed by Kyle, even though Camilla played a part in it. So I also kind of question her long-term strategic outlook, where for that season, she kind of put all of her chips in the bag of winning that final immunity challenge, because no one was taking her to the end if they won final immunity. And she kind of proved that she wasn't the best fire maker either. So I think her long-term outlook on the game wasn't ideal. So I had Camilla here at number 12, which I feel like is good considering she only played one time. I feel like that's a pretty good placement.
She better be practicing fire in the offseason here. Like, she better be ready to go if she sits at Final Four, because I have Camilla much higher. I think that Camilla's game in retrospect is so good, and maybe I'm overhyping it, but I think that Kyle and Camilla's games on 48 are incredible games. And I just think, like, here's how you know this is how you know if a player is really good at Survivor, is their season boring when they dominate it. Kim's season stinks, and Kim's one of the best winners of all time, right? Palau is very hard to rewatch because it's very boring, because Tom just dominates that game. That one at least has a better cast than One World. Boston Rob, Redemption Island sucks. And I do think that Kyle and Camilla dominated that game so much in tandem that's why 48 was as much of a snooze for a lot of people as it was. I truly believe in, like, the internet's never going to agree with me on this, and that's okay. But I truly believe that 48 gets better on rewatches, because you start to appreciate more of how good Kyle and Camilla really were, instead of focusing on Joe and Eva and how it seems so obvious they're going to win. Kyle and Camilla were so good, they knew that they could beat them from final 10 on. They knew they weren't going to lose.
I think that's a really good point. I don't know. I feel like the Kyle factor is what really throws a wrench in it for me. And maybe that's just a composition of the cast of that season. And I think Camilla acknowledges that in one of the tribal councils, where she says, I'm kind of surrounded by a bunch of meat shields here. And that's just not the type of person that Camilla would naturally gravitate towards. I think she works for Discord outside the show. Yeah. So I think if you put Camilla on a cast with the Christian Hubickis and the Rick Devins of the world, she'll have a way better time acclimating into the majority than she would on 48. But there's also, a bunch of challenge beasts on this season too, that you might have a similar experience as 48.
Yeah, that's true. And she knows how to play with it. So look, I'm not moving Camilla from my spot. I'm ready to go. I got her really high. All right. We got Nick Snyder here. Haven't seen the first half of this stream, but if Q isn't ranked number 1, then I'm unsubscribing at Phil. I mean, unsubscribe, Nick. Then again, this is the guy who thinks Lamar Jackson's like a top 5 quarterback of all time. So, got to take shots fired when you can here, Nick. But all right, let's recap our first 11, since now we're into the first half. So I'll just hit this. 22, I have Tiffany, 21, Angelina, 20, Stephanie, 19, Q, 18, Emily, 17, Jenna, 16, Jonathan, 15, Joe, 14, Christian, 13, Coach, and then 12, I have Chrissy.
And I had 22 Q, 21 Angelina, 20 Emily, 19 Rick Devins, 18 Jonathan, 17 Christian, 16 Coach, 15 Tiffany, 14 Joe, 13 Chrissy, 12 Camilla. And now we're at number 11.
Yeah.
Right?
So now we're into the top half here. We only have 2 people, I think, that we are. Oh, no, actually, it's more, because we each have 2. So it's like I had Jenna in my bottom. You still have Jenna to go. I had Stephanie in my bottom. You still have Stephanie to go. And then I have Camilla and Devin still left. But otherwise, we agreed on the rest, which is actually pretty good. So
I feel like there's a pretty clear bottom tier and a pretty clear top tier. Yeah. And then everything in between you can shuffle around. I wouldn't have any major issue with it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go in. No, you know what? You go do your 11 first. Guess first. Who's your 11?
Okay. I'm honored. 11, this is where I got Jenna. So she's still in this section of the list. I'm a little bit higher on Jenna than you are. I think she's someone that's proven that she can overcome difficult situations. She had that. I think she was on the Saboga tribe on All-Stars. She gets thrown into Shapira, where she doesn't really know anyone, and yet her and Rupert are able to lock down that alliance with Boston, Rob, and Amber and keep them loyal all the way to the Final Four. We've also seen Jenna have a cutthroat instinct, which you don't see from a lot of old school people. She was willing to turn on Rupert in that Final Four vote. And we can have an argument over, was that the ideal strategic move for Jenna? But at least prove that she was willing to turn on someone that was really close to her. You mentioned it earlier. She was able to adapt to the game. In that first season, she was one of the few Pagong people that actually recognized that we need to align together and go after, I think they vote against like Hatch at the Final Eight or something like that.
It was, I think I got to look, but yeah, you're right. Cause she was a part of the 4-3-1 vote there and she's the one who goes home at Final Eight in the 4-3-1.
Yeah. So, she was able to adapt in that first season. Who's to say that she can adapt, 49 seasons later? But there are those major negatives. I do think she's missing something socially. I think it's a close vote if it's against Rob or Amber in the end. Even if she wins, if she does win in that situation, it's still not great considering how much Rob and Amber were hated. I think it's probably like a 4-3 in that situation. And then the only other note I have with her is just kind of a common complaint with a lot of these old school contestants. We haven't seen her use an idol. We haven't seen her use an advantage. And depending on how the voting for 50 turned out, there's a chance that the fans voted for the most advantages possible. And Jeff is just throwing them in everybody's bags. And I don't know if Jenna can really handle that.
And that's why Jeff was actually sad and tired, was because he's just had to go through 17 idols at the Final 7 Tribal Council. And that's why Jeff's actually exhausted. It's just because
17 idols held by 5 people, and Suri goes home again.
And Suri goes home again. Exactly. It's so brutal. Now, look, Jenna, I have such high hopes for. I've almost like leveled myself out too much with ranking her maybe at 17. But again, the people who I have in front of her, Jonathan, Joe, Christian, Coach, Chrissy, those are the 5 that I have between where you have her ranked and where I have her ranked. They've all played Survivor in a way that she hasn't. So even if she's third place, like, what would you do with Lex right now if Lex came back and played? Are you really going to sit here and be like, he's a top 5 on this new era? Probably not, right?
Yeah, probably not. I feel like Lex's game on Africa is more impressive than anything that Jenna has done in her career. But I think I would have more confidence in Jenna on a return than Lex, just because I think Lex is going to try to play it as old school as possible.
I agree with that. And I think that's part of the reason why maybe we haven't heard from Lex. I mean, Jenna was ahead of her time. Chuda Man here says that. You'll have to rewatch All Stars to truly realize how ahead of her time she was. I mean, she is, and she's ahead of her time even in Borneo. So I'm fine with that. All right. My number 11, I'm going with Mike White. And I feel like, people, there's the conversation, are people going to let him get a little bit further because of White Lotus and all that? We watched him play before he was super famous. That's what we watched on Dave vs. Goliath. Mike White plays a very good game of Survivor. And the reason why I put him above Chrissy is because his cast loves him and he could get the win. No argument at that final tribal, though. Like a really weak, bad final tribal council performance. And Nick just wanted it more. And it seemed like Mike was just kind of there. I also wonder, like, on a season where so many players did so much, what really did Mike do to separate himself? And I think that's the hard part for me. Mike White is a very good Survivor player, but Mike White didn't do anything to get him into that legend echelon that I feel like maybe the top 10 here are. And granted, I have people who have played once and only new era seasons that I'm saying legend, it's air quotes, but it's, to get into that next level, like Mike White is just on that cut line for me, because on his season, he didn't have to do anything major, anything massive. And he gets to the end and he loses to Nick. And it really was just such a bad final child performance. He almost fits more into the coach scenario.
Oh,
and he does into like a Colby,
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. That's brutal. Like, do you buy into that theory? I've heard people say that Mike White threw it in the final tribal because he wanted Nick to get the money because he realized that he didn't need it as much. Like, do you buy into it that he threw it, or you think he just kind of flopped in the end?
I just think Mike relied too much on who he is as a person. Like, I just think he relied on everybody's going to like me, so they'll vote for me and let's just do it. And he just misread the room. I mean, you have to think he didn't get Alec's vote, and him and Alec are buddies. He doesn't get Carl's vote. Carl's been on the White Lotus, like there were votes to be had there. John and Dan were votes to have. And he just dropped the ball. I don't know.
And I agree with what you said of like Mike missing a big moment on that season, because David versus Goliath is one of those seasons where there's so many crazy tribal councils, right? There's like the John Hennigan blind side. You have Carl playing. I think Carl plays an Idol Nullifier that season.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where he goes bing. So you have these crazy tribals, and Mike doesn't really fit that description. He plays a super stable game from like the final 8 onwards, and he's a major reason why the Goliaths take control in the first place. But I think you just had a jury that was kind of caught up in the crazy tribals of that season, and they wanted to award someone like Nick that followed that general trend. So I have a lot of respect for Mike. I have him slightly higher than you do. I can just, well, I'll reveal it now. I have Mike at number 8. So like 3 spots higher. And a lot of the same points that you had. I will say one thing that I don't think people give Mike enough credit for is that he did come very, very close to winning that season. He almost beats Nick in a jury vote. And I do think if he won final immunity, or if Nick somehow goes out in fire, I think he wins that other alternate final 3 against Kara was her name, right?
He beats Kara. Yeah. Kara has come out and said that she does not think she wins at the final 3 in any scenario, because people were trying to say she was the Rob Goddess, and this was very close after the Chrissy loss. So people were like, oh God, here we go. Like, here we go again. And Kara has said she doesn't really think that she's able to pull it out there, because Kara was really well liked by everybody, but her argument at the end, I don't really know what it would have been.
Yeah. So I think Mike's a good player. I think his losing game on 37 is one of the better losing finalist games in the history of the show. So I had him at 8.
Okay. Yeah. I'll do my 10 because it's somebody already said. I'm going to go with Devins here. And look, you had Devins at 19, and I get that. And there's going to be some people who maybe have Devins at 5, and I can get that. I think that Devins, really, there's no wrong placement unless you're putting him at 1, 2, or 3. And there's really, or if you're putting him at 22, 21, 20. I think you're kind of hitting that cusp, but you have Q and Angelina below him, which I think is necessary. And then I just think Tiffany should be there. But my biggest thing is you're talking about 2 different games. That's the thing with him is he always made the joke of it was 4th place versus 3rd place. That's what we were complaining about. People were mad that 4th place lost, or 4th person out lost to 3rd person out. That's what we were arguing about at the end of the day. And the thing is, though, that I think people forget is his early game isn't bad. The swap kills him. Because him and David have a good thing going. And that 5 person, they're ready to vote Wendy out. But the swap happens. Wendy goes elsewhere, and now they're screwed. He goes home. Once he gets back into the game, now he's got to play a totally different game. He's already had his back against the wall. It's kind of like what we saw Burton do, right? And you would say, how do you really rank Burton? I don't know. I mean, he was a solid player the second time around, but he sucked the first time around. Burton was worse the first time, though, than Devins was, because Devins was kind of a victim of circumstance. Burton did it to himself. So I have Devins here at 10, right in the middle, just barely getting there. Because I also think that the other thing we have to remember is if Devin sits at final 3, he wins that season in a landslide.
Maybe unanimously. The jury of that season adored him, for sure.
Everybody. He wins 4 immunities. He plays 2 or 3 idols correctly. I think he plays 2 idols correctly. His social game isn't lacking. It looks like his social game is lacking when you start to talk about what he had to do on a season, but it's really just the fact of this is a guy who's already playing with his back against the wall. So what's he supposed to do? He's already likable. Here he has the story. That's not going to be the case for this season. So Edge of Extinction people are hard to rank because the season was such a crapshoot. I got to put him at 10 though. I'm going to put him right here at 10, and I'm going to be happy about that.
Yeah, I think 50 will shift the public opinion on Devins one way or the other. He'll either, get voted out in the pre-merge again, and you'll have all the fans saying, see, if it wasn't for the Edge of Extinction, this is who he was. Or he'll go deep into the game, and you'll have people saying that he was swap screwed. It's not going to be anything in the middle. It'll be one side or the opposite.
And here's my question to you. Why would you want to vote Rick Devins out of the game?
That's a really good question. It kind of comes down to where the strategic board lays at the beginning. Because I don't think he'll be a top target going into it all. Mm-hmm. I think there'll be way more people that are perceived as bigger threats than Devins. And I do have to agree with what you said, where a lot of his elimination was primarily due to circumstances. It was due to that tribe swap. But you could also say that he put himself in a position where had that tribe went to 2 tribal councils, it's Wendy that gets voted out than him. So he was still lower on the totem pole of that tribe. but I
He
don't think
thought he
he's
was
gonna
in
be a
better
top
with
target.
War Dog. That was the thing. He didn't realize
Yeah.
he wasn't in as good because War Dog just put himself in the swing position, and that's what killed him.
Yeah, War Dog low-key underrated.
Yeah.
As a
War
Survivor
Dog's
player.
entertaining. I'm surprised that I don't know if he got a call or anything. I mean, I'm surprised though that more people don't talk about War Dog because I just think with Edge of Extinction, it was just so dominated by Devins and the returning players that people kind of forget about everybody else.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think if we don't have the whole new era shift in the 40s, we would have seen, potentially a War Dog or a Victoria or a Gavin come back all after Devins. Like Devins was number one, or maybe a Reem.
I was
Too.
going to say, don't forget Reem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
So
right.
I got my number 10 then.
Yep. You're 10.
This is where I got Genevieve. And I think my opinion of Genevieve has went down slightly since the end of 47. And I think we've seen her play from like the most difficult positions on Survivor, where she was on the bottom in that early merge with Sam and with Kyle. And despite that, she was still able to help flip the game in her favor with that Operation Italy Tribal Council. And that's great. But I keep going back to the fact that a big reason why Genevieve was on the bottom to begin with was because of her own misplay. Like that Saul vote at the final 10 was completely unnecessary for her. And from that point forward, she's just trying to get back in the majority and trying to scrape by for a lot of the game. So that's one like major problem I have. But I do think on the positive end, she's great in terms of jury management. This might be a hot take, but I think she's a real chance at beating Rachel if the two of them go to the end together. It would have been close for sure. They were like the top two jury threats by far. But she proved there that she can connect with the jury and really build up that repertoire. But it's really her threat level management and that strategic timing with the Saul blind side that give me some concern with Genevieve. Plus, now that we're going into the top 10, we're getting a lot of these multi-time contestants that have proven it over and over again. Genevieve with 1 5th place finish, being top 10 is still impressive.
Yeah, so I have Genevieve at 8. Since you already said you had Mike at 8, I might as well do mine. I have Genevieve at 8. My thing with Genevieve is her Keyshawn performance is insane. It's just such another level of manipulation of every single person on her tribe. She gets Rome and Saul to work together. She leaves Teeny out because Teeny doesn't have a vote. So then Genevieve can be like, sorry, but I didn't want to tell you because it wasn't going to make a difference anyway. And then Genevieve's also able to get rid of the person who's throwing her name out there. Great move. What I'm most impressed with Genevieve's game is I remember podcasting that season, and after Genevieve got voted out, or after Saul got voted out, we all said, okay, she's next. She's done. She makes it 5 more tribal councils, I think, before she goes home. That is an unbelievable performance. Saul goes at 10. She goes at 5. That's a great performance. And I think Genevieve has played from the bottom. She has played as the biggest threat in the game. She's played as a nobody. She did that all in one season without even getting to the final 3 or even getting to the fire making position. I think she's one of the best players on this season. So even though she's only played once, she gets my second biggest nod out of the one-time players who didn't win.
Oh, okay. I was like, out of the one-time players, I was just thinking of D and Kyle in my head.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think you brought either of them up.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't even think of with Genevieve, I don't think she's given enough credit for her alliance with Rome. Like, based on what we saw that entire season, Rome was someone that was not easy to work with. No. And yet Genevieve stuck alongside him until she realized that it wasn't worth it anymore. And she was willing to cut him at the Mergatory. So I feel like because of that, Genevieve has proven that you can really put her with anyone on that island, and she's willing to work with them if it advances her for a couple more rounds. She might not want to stick with them long term, but she'll do it for at least a section of the game.
And again, if we start getting into, guessing what's going to happen, all of that, right? So we're doing a defining episode series, and tomorrow we're releasing the Camilla episode. And then at the end of the week on Friday, we'll be releasing Stephanie? No, we already did Stephanie's. We'll be releasing Cerise, and then we're going to do Genevieve's. And we've already recorded the Genevieve episode. Okay. And my thing is, if you start guessing, like, how could Genevieve do on this season? How are people going to view Genevieve? That's different than if you're going to just talk about what is her game coming in. Will and I put out the everything you need to know about Genevieve yesterday on Monday. And we talked a lot about, like, she's really good, but she's also willing to stab you in the back. She's willing to get you out of the game. So whereas Joe or a Colby or somebody like that, they might not have as much game as Genevieve, but there's somebody I'd rather align with than Genevieve, because I've seen Genevieve cut Saul. seen her cut Rome. Like, I've seen her do these things. That scares me because I start wondering, do I have to get her before she gets me? Whereas with Joe and Colby and even Ozzy, maybe Stephanie, I don't have to worry about that. I can cruise through the game.
Yep. But Genevieve's also self-aware about that. I think her big storyline towards the end of the season was, I need to start connecting with people and not put up these walls with them, which is interesting because I feel like those walls enabled her to flip on other people. And despite her having those walls up, people kept gravitating towards Genevieve.
Yeah.
Like, she still kept building these alliances. So maybe with those walls down, everyone else will want to work with her even more.
Yeah.
So you said you had her at number 8, right?
Yeah. So we've both done our 8. But neither one of us have done our 9. So why don't you go first on that?
Okay. For 9, this is where I finally got Ozzy. And Ozzy was one of the more difficult people for me to rank here because he, like you mentioned earlier, he was incredibly close to winning 2 seasons. One jury vote away from winning Cook Islands. If not for that deal between Yule and Adam, he probably wins that season. And he gets super close to winning South Pacific. Granted, it's because production puts a twist in that game that naturally favors physical players like Ozzy. It would be like if we went on the show and then they put Survivor Trivia version of Redemption Island there, but he still got close to winning. So that needs to count for something. It goes without saying, he's the best challenge competitor in the history of the show. And I don't know if it's that close between him and whoever you might consider second place. And I think the only other thing I'd throw out with him is he does have that ability to connect with the jury, which is weird because I was watching a highlight clip of Aussie on South Pacific, and pre-merge Aussie on South Pacific is not a fun time. No. I think he gets blindsided. I forget the girl's name that goes home. Elise goes home, and he's pouting around the Savai camp. He tells the rest of the tribe that he's a free agent and he doesn't want to work with them. Yet if he makes it to the final tribal, he wins. He gets most of those Savai votes. So I do think those are all like major things to look out for when it comes to Ozzy, but I just don't think he can get into the core of a majority. He's the type of person that will always get, not always, but more often than not, get voted out in the early merge. He's on the outside of that I2 tribe on Cook Islands where he would have went out if not for the mutiny twist. He's on the outside of I2 in the post-merge of that season where they wanted to cut him there too, but they just didn't because he kept winning immunity. And a lot of the Savai people kind of saw him more as a figurehead than as an actual like member of their alliance. And then last thing I'll throw out with him is I just don't know if he's adapted super well to the modern show. Like, to me, the Game Changers run from Ozzy felt like the final chapter from Ozzy. Like, I was surprised that he was coming back for 50 at all. And he keeps hitting this like dead horse over and over again where he says, oh, if you keep me around, I'll provide for the tribe. I'll catch the fish. And I think when he gets voted out of that season, he tells the rest of the Game Changers cast, like, who's going to catch the fish now for you? So I just don't think Ozzy's mindset or outlook on Survivor has changed much over the last 20 years.
Yeah, Zudaman here, Zudaman, I don't know what it is, but he says, I'll always stand by my opinion that Malcolm should have had Ozzy's spot. 100% in my opinion.
100%.
I think Malcolm is one of the biggest misses. I think Dom is the only bigger miss from the old school than Malcolm, pretty much. Of people who are realistic, right? Sean Rector, I wanted on here, but Sean Rector doesn't feel like it was all that realistic anyway. But I get where you're coming from with Ozzy. I'm a little bit higher. My number 9 is Charlie.
Wow.
I think Charlie's a little overrated, and that doesn't mean that I don't think Charlie can win this season in anything. So much of Charlie's game was reliant on his relationship with Maria, and it's kind of how you have Camilla ranked 12, and you're saying, well, because of with Charlie with Kyle and everything like that, you know, that's where I have a hard time with her. I have a hard time with Charlie because of his relationship with Maria. They were in such lockstep. And then when she wins immunity, his social game is good enough that he's able to make sure Q goes home in that moment. But everybody was worried about Maria as the biggest threat in the game right now. So that's why they were willing to vote out Q there rather than voting out Charlie, because they wanted the numbers. Charlie gets to the end and loses to Kenzie, and Kenzie plays a very good social game, but maybe it's just not the right jury for Charlie. But it does worry me that he's only able to grab 3 votes there at the end from Kenzie, because maybe it's just like the lack of killer instinct or something from Charlie as he was sitting there. But to lose to Kenzie with the game that Charlie played, to me, I'm like, well, maybe Charlie's game wasn't as good then. He didn't play socially as well as Kenzie. He plays pretty good physically, but maybe he's not as good as Maria. And strategically, again, like, what is Charlie's major move? I know there's all of those blind sides with the idols, so it gets a little confusing in Survivor 46, but his biggest move is probably the Q boot, but he does that with Liz and with Kenzie and with Ben. So how much credit can I really give him on that? So,
and I think he tells Maria in that round that Q is going home. He does. And Maria still tells Q to not play the idol.
Because Maria thinks that she has all the numbers. She thinks everybody's more aligned with her than they really are. Look, I think Charlie's a very good player. Again, we're getting into top 10. Like you said, you had Genevieve at 10, and you're saying one-time player to finish 5th. That's great. I'm not going to look just solely at placement here. We said that off the beginning. Charlie's a second-place finisher. Hot take. I might rank Austin higher than Charlie as a Survivor player.
No way.
Same loss.
Get behind that.
And I think D is a much better winner.
I don't think Charlie was ever duped to the same extent that Austin was with the Emily vote and the Drew vote on 45. I don't think Charlie's low points on 46 ever reached that same degree. And I'll do a little bit of Charlie defense here, and then I can circle back to it later. I feel like the Maria argument is so often used against Charlie. And I do think it's fair in the sense that the perception around Charlie was that he was kind of Maria's sidekick. And I do think he could have done a better job at letting other people know that I'm just as valuable in this partnership as Maria. But when you look at the actual direction of 46, I feel like Charlie gets the best of Maria more often than not, like especially in the pre-merge, where I felt like the storyline on that original green, I want to say it's the Siga tribe. The storyline there is that it's the men versus the women. And Maria's tight with Mariah and Jem, and Charlie's super tight with Tim and Ben. And at the end of the day, who wins that battle? Charlie's able to convince Maria to cut all of her secondary allies while he keeps his in the game, and he keeps Ben around all the way to the final 4 where Ben was willing to bring him to the final tribal. So I do think there's knocks against Charlie, the biggest like being his perception in relation to Maria, but I don't think Maria outplayed him. I feel like that's something that a lot of the cast believe, but if you look at who actually went home and in the order that they went out, Charlie was like subtly undermining Maria every step of the way.
Yeah, look, Charlie's 1 vote away from winning because if he gets Maria's vote there at the end, he gets Ben's to win the game. Ben would have voted for Charlie to win unless he accidentally writes Kenzie's name for the second time. But I just think that Charlie, there's no pizzazz, there's no next level. I agree. He plays a solid game.
He's kind of a master of none. I do think that's fair.
I think that's a great way to put it. He's a jack of all trades. Exactly. Like he doesn't have that thing to put it like Malcolm, his first season, if he gets the final 3, probably wins. You see the way Malcolm plays, the way he navigates with Denise throughout that game early on. And then you see the way that he's able to navigate the post-merge, even being a physical threat. They compared themselves a lot to Malcolm and Denise. Yeah. They don't play like Malcolm and Denise, in my opinion.
Oh, well, I think the Malcolm and Denise comparison fell apart the second Maria
that's true.
Saw the fire. The second Maria saw the fire in Kenzie's eyes. That's where the comparison between those two dropped. Because I think Malcolm gave Denise a hard time in the final tribal, but he still voted for her at the end of the day.
His whole thing was he wanted to make her sweat a little bit. He wanted her to have to fight for it. He said that, I think, in some post-game interview afterwards, where he said, I wanted to make Denise earn it, not just feel like it was already given to her, because he knew she was going to win.
And that's why this is a little bit off topic, but that's why I think we should bring back the old final tribal council format. That should have been a poll that they had for Survivor 50, because if we have it in 50, it'd be really interesting, but I would have loved to see what question would Maria have posed to Charlie on 46 to potentially earn that jury vote. I feel like Charlie was never given, the full platform to cater it completely to Maria, because he was under the impression that I'm getting that vote no matter what. Am I good to jump to number? We're at 7 now, right? Because we both did the 8s out of order.
Yeah, we did our 8s. You had Mike, I had Genevieve. So now we're up to 7.
Okay, so number 7, I got probably one of Jeff Probst's favorite players in the history of the show. This is where I got Colby. I have a little bit more confidence in Colby now. I was watching one of the RHAP interviews. They're doing the Survivor 50 files. And I saw Tina's interview where she revealed that Colby's been studying the new era and he's been getting some offers. And to no one's surprise, it's probably a lot of the challenge beasts. And I think the consensus opinion on Colby has went down over time, mainly because people get hyper fixated on his decision to go to the end with Tina over Keith. But if you look at his track record, like we've seen Colby play from all sorts of positions. He's played from the top on Australian Outback. He's in the middle of that tribe in the pre-merge, and he flips on Mitchell, which establishes that onion alliance that runs the second half of the game. So we've seen him kind of play from a head position alongside Tina on that season. We've seen him play from the bottom, where on Heroes versus Villains, he's kind of outside that Heroes alliance the entire time, but he still gets all the way to the final five somehow. And even though he loses to Tina on Australian Outback, like Colby knows how to connect with the jury. He loses to Tina by just one vote. If he goes to the end against any one of those villains on season 20, he probably wins that season as well. So I think there's a lot to be impressed with when it comes to Colby, but we need to acknowledge that he does lack that killer instinct. He doesn't vote out Tina at the final three. Granted, that was a long time ago, so maybe the modern version of Colby has a different outlook on the game. He's not trying to impress other people and get jobs in Hollywood afterwards. And I do think he plays a little bit emotional. We see that when he turns against Sugar. We see it when he turns against Jerry. I think he's someone that kind of operates a little bit based on vibes. But when you put it all together, just the consistency of his resume, the challenge wins, the social game, it leads to a good player, and I'd put him at number 7.
Yeah, so I've been going back and forth with my 5, 6, and 7 like crazy, and I've been crossing out, writing down, and those 3 people, you've already mentioned all of them, and Colby is one of them, and I finally locked in where I want him, because here's the deal. Colby almost wins Survivor twice. Now, yeah, he loses to Tina, but I personally think Tina's one of the best winners the show's ever had. I mean, people forget
Tina my top 10.
Tina cutting Mad Dog at the beginning. That is brutal. We hadn't seen that level of gameplay yet. And Tina's doing that. And Tina's dumb as a fox, right? I'm from Tennessee. Don't worry about me. You don't have to worry about anything. And then she almost wins Blood versus Water. Tina's a very good Survivor player. And so I'm not going to, honestly, she's a great Survivor player. So I'm not going to really hold it against Colby there. Colby's biggest flaws are he's loyal to a fault. And you already said it. He's emotional. He would rather get rid of Jerry because he doesn't like Jerry. He gets rid of Hatch because Hatch is, the bigger threat. And then he goes home in All-Stars. And in the beginning of Heroes versus Villains, he defends your girl Stephanie LaGrossa, which is what almost gets him voted out of the game in 17th place. And he barely survives, mainly just because of JT and Tom. But Colby is a great Survivor player who almost won twice. And that's what ultimately helped me determine how I was going to rank these players. So as my number 7, I have Camilla. And I was thinking about putting her higher, but I'm going to put her at 7 because she's only played once. I think there's so much to be said about the subtle moves that she made in that season. The Thomas blindside is absolutely incredible. She makes a lot of good moves with Kyle, and if she gets to the end, she wins that season. Now, you said she had to win immunity. She also could have just won fire. Everybody knows that if you get to 4, you have a shot to make fire. If she gets to the end, her cast has said she probably beats Kyle at the end of that game. Yeah. So I love Camilla. I think that she's the best non-winner from the new era out of what we're seeing on this cast. I still would take Jessie over Camilla, no questions asked. But that's where, so I put her at 7. At 6, I go Aussie, who you mentioned. And look, I know that South Pacific, he gets voted out twice, but he has one immunity challenge from winning that season. He's one vote away from winning his first season. He has to get blindsided with an idol in his pocket in his second season. Yes, he totally sucks on Game Changers, but what is Game Changers anyway? I'm not going to totally throw Aussie away because of one really, truly terrible game. But Aussie could have been coming into this even ranked higher than D and Kyle had he had a better showing in Game Changers, and he didn't, which is why he is 6 and not potentially 2 or 3. If South Pacific was the last time I saw Aussie, I might honestly have him at 2 or 3 in this list. But Game Changers.
Wow. I don't think I wouldn't go that high with him, but it's mainly because of that Redemption Island twist. I don't fault Aussie too much for that first boot because it was intentional. And I think it actually shows that he's able to kind of adapt to a lot of the random, BS twists that Jeff might throw into the game. But it's really that second elimination where a large reason why he gets voted out in the early merge is because his tribe loses the trust of Cochran. And Ozzy was the guy at the head of that tribe constantly talking down to Cochran.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of his downfalls on that season are self-inflicted. That's interesting, though, that you'd put him in the top 3 if it weren't for game changers.
Let me ask you this. If you don't look at New Era, let's go to the 39-day format. So the first 39 seasons, don't count Winners at War or Heroes, Villains, or any of that. Who do you think played the best runner-up game in the history of the show?
Oh, I'd say, well, it's tough because I feel like for me, when I'm doing rankings of like runner-up games, you can look at it as like who was closest to winning. But generally when I do my rankings, I do them according to dominance because everyone that was a runner-up didn't win the game. So I would probably say it's Boston Robin All-Stars just because of the degree of control that he had over that season.
Now, again, though, if you're not counting returning player seasons, because that's what I'm looking at. So I'm talking
new
returning player seasons. No Heroes, Villains, no Winners at War, no Game Changers. Like, I'm not talking Parvati or anything like that. I mean, like, first-time players. Do you have one that pops to mind?
I have. Oh, man, I can check my notes. I know I started doing a ranking of this at one point. I'm not going to lie. Charlie's really high up there for me. He's probably in the top 5 all time. Just with how close he came to winning that season, his degree of control, the social insulation that came with it all. Restricting it to only one-time players makes it tough. I'll need to go back and check.
It doesn't just have to be one-time players. I guess what I'm saying is like I don't want to count Amanda on her second run. Like Courtney, you can count. Like I'm just more saying, or because Courtney's first game is when she was the runner-up. I'm just saying, like, don't count Natalie Anderson because Natalie Anderson's probably the best runner-up in the history of the show because she's also a winner, So,
oh, you mean in terms of like player quality?
Yeah, just like from the season that they finished second place on their season. Just who do you think who jumps to mind as like they're the best one when it's not their second time playing, it's their first time playing?
Man. Okay, so we're saying player quality based off of first time playing finalist.
So exactly like Wigglesworth, Colby, Kim Johnson, Nalia.
Yeah, let me see.
Clay Jordan, if you want to go there.
Amanda. No, I wouldn't go to Clay. I don't think anyone would go with Clay after that season. I would say probably I think Amanda Kimmel and Charlie would probably be the 2 highest on my list. Amanda Kimmel on China, because I do think
she was in second.
Oh, you're right. See,
I'm putting you on the spot big time,
Yeah, I feel like most people think that, including me right there, we covered China on our podcast, and I still considered her as a second placer. I guess for the time being, I'll go with Charlie. I'll need to check back at I need to go through my documents because I know I have a whole list of a bunch of them. I'm definitely blanking on someone right now. Because I feel like a lot of those runner-ups on their first time had major flaws. We talked about before we started recording, and someone that we'll hit on later, like Aubrey, I think has a great run on Co Wrong, but the whole Neil Medevac situation kind of throws a major wrench into it all for me.
And the reason why I brought this up in Purple Rain's like, this is awkward. I don't feel like it was awkward. We're having a good conversation. I
enjoy the rankings. Yeah.
The reason why I brought it up is because you have Dom.
Oh,
Russell,
yeah. I just saw Dom in the chat.
Dom, Russell, I think Colby's Australia game, even though it was a totally different game than what we've seen lately. And I think Ozzy's Cook Island game comes into a lot of people's mind as one of the greatest non-winning games. He lost to Yule. He only lost by 1 vote. He didn't have the super idol. He dominates the challenges. He overcomes the 8-4. Like, I think that stands out to a lot of people. So that's why I might have put Ozzy at 2 or 3 here, because I truly believe that first game he played is just ridiculous. It's so good.
See, I think it's great from a physical perspective, but I think outside that, I don't think he had a lot going on. I think his big move, like strategically that whole season, is him throwing the challenge to get rid of Billy Garcia. And I don't know if that was a great move for him in the first place.
Yeah.
So
that's our defining episode for Ozzy too, is that move.
It's the Billy Garcia one? Out of every episode of Aussie across 4 seasons,
we were only doing first season. We were only doing their first season. Yeah.
Okay. That's way more justifiable. I thought you meant like out of everything that he's been in.
Yeah, no, it'd probably be when he throws the challenge in South Pacific to get voted out and then comes back and wins the South Pacific Redemption Island. That's the most Aussie thing you could do.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm looking at the chat right now since I blanked on that answer to the best one-time player runner-up games. I would probably say that Fishback and Dom are better than Charlie's game. And I might lean more towards Fishback just because I think he had the numbers in place to cut JT, but he just couldn't do it because JT kept winning immunity. Whereas I don't know if Dom wanted to cut Wendell earlier in the game. He does it at Final Four, but not at Final 5 or 6.
Yeah, that's fair. Dom and Wendell had to use each other all the way down to at least Final Four. They didn't have a choice, just with the way that shook out. So no, I appreciate it, but that's why I go Aussie here at 6. And like I said, I could have gone higher, but his game changers game just, I think it really does ruin his reputation. And that might be a good thing for him. I don't think he has a chance to win this season. But again, somebody had said in the comments earlier, well, how can you have, Camilla at 7? She's going to be too big of a threat. That's not what I'm talking about, though. She's a threat, which is why I have her at 7. I'm basing this off of just how they played, not what I think they can do. To me, Camilla's ceiling might be 17th place on this season. But in terms of how good she played, that's why I put her at 7. And then I had Aussie at 6. So if you want to go with your 6.
Okay, yeah. So I had Colby at 7 and 6. This is where Stephanie LaGrossa comes into play for me. So I'm way higher on her than you. Now, full disclaimer, I have not seen Stephanie in her shows outside of Survivor. So I didn't see her in Snake on the Grass. I didn't see her on The Traders either. And I've heard people say that her games on those shows aren't too great. So maybe that's playing into this as well. But I feel like we've seen Stephanie play, the big thing that I'm looking at when it comes to this ranking is, can you play well from the top? Can you play well from the bottom when things aren't going your way? And we've seen Stephanie do it on both sides. She put herself in the middle of that tribe on Palau, survived all the way, as that tribe got decimated. In the new era, it's super common that we get one of these tribes destroyed in the pre-merge. And I feel like Stephanie's one of the few people that's proven that she can still make it out when things don't necessarily go her way. I think she's a stronger physical competitor too than her stats might suggest. She only has one individual immunity win, but I think she's someone that could win a bunch of challenges. And I think she's someone that can just connect with a bunch of different people. I think if she makes it to the end of Palau, she has a good chance at winning, but that might be similar dynamic that we talked about earlier with the Emily Flippins of the world. But I do think you brought up some major concerns when it comes to Stephanie, the biggest being that jury management piece where on Guatemala, I do think a big reason why she lost that season is because of the anti-returning player sentiment, but it's also due to her poor social play. I don't think she handled her relationships very well on that season at all. And it got to the point where I read this online. I don't know if it's true, but apparently at the final 3, when Danny walked in with the immunity necklace, the whole jury stood up and clapped because they were rooting for her so heavily against Rafe and Stephanie. And I also don't know, I know that Stephanie can put herself in a position of power, but I'm not sure if she can use that power effectively, where for a large chunk of the post-merge of Guatemala, I feel like Stephanie is working more towards the strategic benefits of Rafe than Stephanie herself. She cuts people like Judd, which was completely against her best interest, but she only did it to help out Rafe. She cuts Lydia at the Final 4, which is insane, but she only does that because Rafe knows that if he goes to the Final 3 with Danny and Stephanie, he has 2 different potential paths to the end.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've seen Stephanie operate from a lot of different positions. I think she's a good physical player. After your argument, I might be a bit lower on her, to be honest. I would probably drop her a couple spots, but I do think she would still be in my top 10.
Okay. Yeah, I think the thing with Stephanie, too, is, she loses 6-1 in Guatemala, but there is always that argument to be made of, we'd never seen that style of game before, and people were coming in, and Stephanie was being so idolized that when they were getting stabbed in the back by her, they were so much more hurt than if they were stabbed in the back by somebody else, which is ultimately what hurts her because she was coming in as the hero and everybody wanted to be Stephanie's friend. If you meet somebody, let's say you meet a Survivor player at an event and it's somebody that you really revere and then they're an asshole at the event, not even an asshole, they just don't really talk to you. you're going to have a lower perception of them because you're like, oh, I thought they were going to be so much better. You built them up in your head, right? That's what happened with Stephanie coming on this season. And somebody said there was the anti-returning player sentiment. You said that as well. My biggest concern, though, is we have seen so many players do better at a final tribal council, even with some of that sentiment. We see Boston Rob win. We see Coach get a couple votes. We see Cochran win. Like, we've seen that style work in a way that it doesn't, that Stephanie just wasn't able to make it work at all. Now, granted, she was the first to have to do it, so there's a little bit of something that goes into that, but it's her heroes villains game that scares me, where I'm like, can Stephanie turn it off and on? That's what I'm worried about. And we haven't seen her in a long time, and I don't know. I have her at 20, you have her at 6. Even if you still had her top 10, we're still on opposite ends of the spectrum here.
So again, I feel like we have a pretty similar top 5 then, looking at who's left on the board, right?
4 of the 5 people are the same.
Okay. So do you want to do your number 5 first, or I can?
I will, because it's the person that we don't have the same, and I have Colby.
Okay.
So Colby, look, just like I said with Aussie, you almost win the game twice, and Colby almost won it in a regular fashion, right? Colby almost wins it in Australia, loses by 1 vote, graded challenges. Comes out in All-Stars, is one of the biggest targets. He's a bigger target than a lot of the winners coming into that season. He was the most popular player in the history of the show coming into All-Stars. Like, it was crazy. And so he gets voted out early there, but still makes it to 12th place, I think. I think he's 12th, Ethan's 11th, and then Jerry is 10th, if I'm not mistaken. And then we get to his 3rd game. And his 3rd game is decimated by the internet. And it's so wrong. I just watched it, and I'm like, man, was I buying into the hype that Colby sucked in Heroes Villains too? Because Colby has no shot from day 1 and takes that and goes to 5th place. We should be praising what that man did. Yeah, he's not good at challenges anymore. Okay. The challenges of the new era are random as hell. He might win one anyway. But Colby he proved his loyalty. He had a better social game on that season than people want to give him credit for. And he wins if he sits next to those villains. So he was that close to winning 2 different seasons of Survivor. When I look at him on this cast and I look at what he's accomplished compared to the others, I just have to sit here and say, he's number 5. He's a top 5 player on this cast. That doesn't mean, though, that he's going to be a top 5 player on season 50. He could suck in the new era. He could be terrible in the new era. But in terms of what I've seen from 48 seasons of Survivor and what I've seen here, he's number 5.
Yeah, I think my hot take when it comes to Colby is that if you retroactively went back in time and flipped his performance on All-Stars and Heroes versus Villains, the public opinion on Colby would be way higher. I think because his most recent appearances, him being Superman in a fat suit, people just think that he's washed up at this point. And I don't think that's true. Like, that ability to just survive on the bottom and lay low, it's a skill set in Survivor. And that's something that Colby proved on that season that he didn't necessarily have on Australian Outback. My number 5 is someone that we haven't hit yet. No, we have hit. I actually had 2 contestants at 5/4, and I was going to make a game time decision on it. So I had Aubrey and Charlie at the 5-4 turn, because I feel like my opinion of Charlie has went up over time while my opinion of Aubrey has went down. And I think I'm going to put Charlie at 5, mainly because of the sample size. We just haven't seen as much from Charlie as we've seen from Aubrey at this point. And I mentioned it earlier. I think that Charlie thoroughly outplays Maria in the early merge of that season. And he's a jack of all trades. He's good socially. He's good physically, wins a couple immunity challenges. And I think what's underrated about Charlie is he's great in terms of threat level management. Maria takes the shot at him, I think, at the final 6 where Q goes home. But outside that, he's really safe for that entire season. And I think he understood the importance of finding a player that you can prop up in front of yourself and understanding when is the optimal time to cut that player. And in the new era, I don't think we're necessarily living in a time where you can have a Kim Spradlin-esque game or a Boston Rob-esque game. Like, the most dominant game that we've seen from the new era, in my opinion, is D. But even D gets targeted at the final 5, and she's nearly taken out if Katurah doesn't get paranoid in the voting booth. Like, Charlie understood that the way this game works now is you don't want to be the top dog on the board. You want to have someone to push in front of you. So he had Maria in front of him while making all these other connections on the island. That way he could strike when the time opened up. So I have a lot of respect for Charlie's game. And I haven't made an official winner pick for the season yet, but I will seriously consider Charlie with that spot. I think I might make him my winner pick.
I could see Charlie winning the season for sure. I mean, look, I have him at 9, you have him at 5. That's not that much of a difference, right? It's pretty close, but I could see Charlie absolutely winning because he's so unassuming. He's so unassuming. He's so unassuming. It's so unassuming to the point that I'm like, what was his move? But I understand what you're saying there with what his gameplay is. However, I agree with your sentiment that Aubrey is 4 because I also have her at 4.
Yeah. She just has the bigger sample size than Charlie. And I bet after Wrong, people were hyping up Aubrey to the same extent. And I guess last thing I'll say about Charlie, and this is just more of a predictive thing. Maybe this is an idea for a future podcast episode for you, but have you done one on like what a win would mean to each of the contestants if they were actually 150? There's a good idea for you, because if Charlie wins 50, his 2 runs are a winning game on a monumental season and another game where he loses because his number 1 ally, saw the fire in Kenzie's eyes at the last second. So if Charlie wins 50, I think he will seriously jump into potentially like greatest of all time conversations. I wouldn't put him up as high as Tony, but he could be like a top 5 player with a win.
I love that. I wrote that down. I'm stealing your idea. You gave it to me. It's here. It's mine.
There you go.
No, I love that. I do love that idea though. That's something that like, it's so tough. Like, what do you put out in July and what do you put out when the season actually gets closer? We gotta have something to put out when the season gets closer. Right. But I really do love that. I think that that's a great idea because Charlie's, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like Charlie could be that close to being a 2-time winner. And then that gets into the conversation of what do you do with Kyle or D if they were to win this season? Like,
yeah,
what do we do with that? I don't know. So I get where you're coming from. I'm always reluctant with the new era people to put them like too high, to overdo it, all of that stuff. I feel like you got to earn your stripes, and the new era people haven't had a chance to earn their stripes at all. So now we're actually going to get to see them have a chance to earn their stripes. So what does that mean for them, and what does that mean for their legacy and all that? I could see Charlie, again, Charlie could be my 9 now, and then at the end of the season, he could be my number 1 coming out of the season. Like, who knows?
Yeah. So you said you also have Aubrey at 4 though, right?
Yeah. So here's the deal. I got to dive into this one. So I keep in contact with Lauren O'Connell from Edge of Extinction, and we were talking not too long ago when we did the biggest snubs. We were talking, and we were having a conversation, and she was like, talking about Aubrey, and it really opened my eyes to this thing of like Aubrey's last game was so bad. It was so bad. Her Edge of Extinction game was just a disaster. But at the same time, what comes up and like what Lauren was saying, because she really thinks like that Aubrey could win this season, is they get rid of the returning player. It's not that crazy or that hard of a thing to do. Like, it makes sense in the moment, right? And so when I think about Aubrey's first 2 games, her Wrong game is excellent. Now I'm like one of the ultimate Michelle stands out there, and Michelle deserved to win that season. I think Michelle is one of the best winners the show I ever had. I think your social game is absolutely incredible. But Aubrey plays a phenomenal strategic game. She gets saved by the Neil medevac. Maybe she gets helped by Joe getting, but she actually might get hurt by Joe getting sick, so it kind of levels out.
I think that screwed her over. I think if Joe doesn't get medically evacuated, Aubrey more than likely goes to the end with Joe and Ty and wins that game. Yeah.
Wins pretty easy. So that's the thing, right? Like when you look at Aubrey's first game, she gets saved and then gets hurt. And she goes to the end and she loses to Michelle. And I think that people don't respect Michelle's game as much as they should. And maybe we're getting the same argument almost as Charlie and Kenzie. Charlie might not be as revered by some people because they don't think that Kenzie was that good of a winner, but Kenzie is a very good winner because the social game is the hardest thing to show. So when I look at what Aubrey pulled off on that season and then comes back 2 seasons later, 1 year later, the freshest thing in everybody's minds when they go out to film season 34, because they haven't seen 33, right? So they don't know Zeke and Michaela. They know going into Game Changers that Aubrey just played this crazy game where most people feel she should have won.
Yeah.
And yet, on a season full of half the people on that season, most people didn't even realize played Survivor, let alone were Game Changers. Aubrey comes out, and Aubrey finishes 5th place. And yeah, she votes wrong a lot. She's on the wrong side of the numbers a lot. But she gets to 5th place with probably the second biggest target coming into that season. Maybe 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. She was top 5 biggest target because you forget Sandra was there, JT was there. You forget all of that. But Sandra, JT, Aubrey,
Cirie, Malcolm, maybe.
I think Aubrey was a bigger threat than Malcolm because we had seen her more recently. Malcolm was season 26. He goes out earlier. Like, we just watched Aubrey get second place, and she gets fifth place. And you know what? I'm going to jump in on the who cares what she did in Edge of Extinction. She was at a disadvantage anyway. The only reason that Aubrey looks bad is because of how well the other returning players did on Edge of Extinction. If that was a normal season, maybe two people go pre-merge or something. Like maybe David and Kelly don't. Maybe Kelly's best friend in the whole wide world isn't on her starting tribe. This time.
I was going to say, when you talked to Lauren O'Connell about snub, she definitely brought up Wentworth, right?
100%.
Yeah, that's probably the first name.
First name. I mean, she loves Kelly Wentworth. And that's the thing. And then you have David and Devins who really hit it off.
Yeah.
Aubrey didn't have that person, and she doesn't have the physical prowess of Joe. So she goes out early and everybody makes fun of her, and her that episode where she goes is brutal because it's all from her point of view and she gets blindsided and all that.
Yeah, and she goes out with an idol in her pocket, right?
With an idol in her pocket.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's like they knew her threat level. Her threat level is lower than it should be coming into this season. And I've kind of convinced myself that Aubrey could win this season now because people just aren't looking at her as threatening as she. We both have her as number 4 best player out of the 22 that we know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's how the cast is viewing her coming out there.
And I think that Edge of Extinction game for her could be the Tony Game Changers for Aubrey, because I didn't watch Winners at War live when it actually happened, but I would assume that going into that season, people thought Tony was a good player, but probably not, the number 1 or top 3 contestant on the board, just because you had seen he was a bit high variance. Could be a similar situation with Aubrey right here. And I also think it's funny that we talked about Colby on Heroes versus Villains and how people kind of make fun of that run because he was outside the majority for a large stretch of it. Aubrey has a similar game on Game Changers, where she doesn't really know what's going on for a long time. She still gets all the way to the final 5. And if you put Aubrey in the end up against Troy Zan and Brad Culpepper, I think she has a shot. It's not like she made it that deep into the season with no win equity at all. And she's someone that just knows how to play from a position of power very well. I think her non-winning game on Ko Wrong is some really impressive work, especially when it comes to her relationship with Ty. Like the fact that she convinces Ty to not save Scott Pollard with that super idol is like absolutely insane to me. I think Ty would have been way better off going with the Scotts and Jasons of the world, these people that were hated by the rest of the cast, and trying to ride with them to the end. And instead, Aubrey pulls him over. So I feel like Aubrey has that ability to convince other people to do things that might not be in their best interest. So I agree with you. I think she's at number 4. With that said, if she goes out on 50 and she completely flops, she will need to drop in my all-time rankings.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, I think I have her all-time somewhere in the 30s. But if we have 2 or 3 seasons of her just not really knowing what's going on, you reach a certain point where the sample size will build up against that Ko Wrong game.
Yeah. The sample size at this point is so big that it's hard to even rank 50 players anyway, because we're almost to the point of having 50 winners. So it's which winners are you throwing out for some of these players? So yeah, I get where you're coming from on that. So we have the same top 3. We have the same top 4. We're 1 for 1. So who do you have at 3?
3, this is where I got Kyle. And this was tough.
So we have the same
2 and 3
thing right now.
Yeah, 2 and 3 were really close for me. I feel like Kyle is someone that just understands a jury so well. He has that confessional in the merge of 48 where he says that this is a game where you need to play in the margins. Even though everyone else is hopping in confessional and saying, Joe is the big threat. We got to vote out Joe. He's the one that's going to win this game. Kyle was the only person that knew that I don't need to take the shot at Joe. I can subtly outplay him, go to the end, and actually beat him. And I feel like Kyle's someone that knows how to pull off some of those more complex strategic moves, which we just haven't seen from some of the old school people. He convinces Joe and Eva to turn on David, which was horrible for their games. He later pulls off the Shaheen blindside, which was really impressive. And I just think he's a very affable personality. I don't think there was anyone on 48 that did not get along with Kyle. So I think when he goes into 50, he'll be able to work with just about anybody. But there were some things that held me back from ranking him higher because he was super, super close to ranking number 2 overall for me. And the biggest knock against Kyle in my mind is that missing killer instinct where, like, spoiler, I'm going to have D at number 2 because I just feel like D is more
we have
willing
the
to stab
same
someone
1,
in the
2,
back.
3. We're there.
Yeah.
You got D at 2. Sari has to be 1. So go ahead.
So I feel like D has that ability to just like stab someone in the back if she needs to. And Kyle does that. Kyle does it at the Final Four. He puts Camilla into fire making, which is great. But you also need to look at like who Kyle rolled with to the Final Four. He went with Joe, Eva, and Camilla. And those are probably his 3 closest allies in the game. And that's good from a positioning perspective. But at the same time, it proves that he wasn't willing to just get rid of them when he absolutely needed to. And same criticism I had with Camilla. I don't think his outlook on the end game is particularly great. Like, no one in that scenario was taking him to the final 3. He was going to go into fire no matter who won that final immunity challenge. So I think Kyle's a great player, and I think there's a real argument for putting him ahead of D, but just that killer instinct is what held me back. But what's your rationale on this one?
So the reason I put D over Kyle is D, I think, played the more dominant game. And a lot of people will say, no, D didn't do that. She barely beat Austin and she had to get lucky with the Katura thing. Every time people got information, Katura would come back to D and Austin would go to D and Julie would go to D. They were eating up everything D said. She's great at challenges. She's great socially. She's great strategically. She's a triple threat. And Kyle is a triple threat as well. But Kyle was on such a unique season in terms of he was late in that game where the only real strategist left was his closest ally, right? And that was Camilla. Joe and Eva weren't strategists. They were playing a different game than we're used to seeing Survivor be. And so I think that Kyle had so many great subtle moves that were just so unbelievably well executed, right? The Shaheen boot is absolutely out of control. The David situation is awesome. And then you had the what do you call it? The Thomas boot, which was Camilla and Kyle really working in hand in that. And Kyle with the earliest idol play of any Survivor winner, right? He plays that idol.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Successfully in the season they win. He has the earliest idol play. And so I think about all the things that Kyle did right, but he was so closely connected with Camilla, like you're saying. D had a lot of people that she was going to, and Kyle did too, and it comes down to the social games. But I guess what puts D over the top for me is I just think the whole body of work and who she was playing against. I think that D's situation was a little bit more difficult than Kyle's. I agree with you about the killer instinct, but I also think that Kyle will have a different outlook coming out here the second time. So that is definitely a knock for him right now, but I don't think we're going to see the same thing of Kyle being like, I can't vote out Joe. We shared too much. He's done with that. This is an all-star Survivor. This isn't first-time Survivor. I'm coming out here and I'm actually making friends. This was very close for me too. I considered Kyle over D, but I still think D played the most dominant game of the new era.
Because I think between the two of them, I would say that Kyle might be the slightly better social player, but D's the better strategist. I have a lot of confidence in D looking at the board and identifying the optimal move. And a large stretch of the end game of 45 is directed by D, which is why I agree with what you said. Like, I get so annoyed when people say, oh, D was just banking on the re before, but we have evidence in the edit. We have confessionals of D saying, Kendra threw my name out. I want Kendra to go home. And then Kendra gets booted at final 9. We see her pull off the whole Emily blind side. She does the Drew blind side at final 6. Like, if you're going to put Kyle ahead of D, I think the main things that you can hit on are the final 5 vote, which is a pretty lucky situation for D, and her threat level management. Because I think I interviewed Austin after that season, and he said that he planned on putting D into fire making if you want final immunity. I don't know if that's true based on the edit we got, but I feel like Kyle might be a little bit better in finding people and kind of riding deeper into the game than D, but I just trust D's strategic mind more.
Yeah, and there's this comment from Nate Will, weird world where Kyle doesn't find that idol and he's a random swap screwed pre-merge boot, just like Thomas.
Yeah, and then Thomas probably goes on to win the season.
Seriously, that was my winner pick, man. I'm pissed still at Kyle.
Better than mine. Mine was Stephanie on that season. Too loyal to the Stephanies.
And neither one of us were very close there. Maybe that's what you were doing. You thought we were still ranking that Stephanie and not LaGrossa. But Yeah, it's really close between D and Kyle. I think that they did pick the two best winners from the new era, and that's with a lot of respect to Marianne. I think Marianne plays an unbelievable game, but I think they ultimately chose and Rachel too, but I think they ultimately chose the two that I would put as my 1-2. And so, look, maybe that's where 49, maybe Rizgat or Savannah are also a winner, and that's where we're going to get three winners from the new era, and we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's more than likely going to be one of them as a winner, right? Because if it's three tribes, you're going to have one winner on each tribe. At least that's my guess.
That's what I would think. But then I'm also like, well, why do we have three new era winners and zero pre-40 winners? I don't get that. So,
yeah.
But all roads lead to Suri. There was no way you weren't going to put three at one. Like this is one of those podcasts where you're like, okay, everybody knows the end result, so enjoy the 2 hours and 14 minutes before we get there because you know it's got to be Suri at one. I don't care that she hasn't won. I don't care that Dean Kyle won. Suri has essentially won Survivor 3 times. She just hasn't won. You know what I mean? Like she's gone out in a stupid way every time. She got 0 votes against in Game Changers, goes home because of Idol Train. In Heroes versus Villains, it takes an idle play by Tom Westman at Final 17 to get her out of the game. It takes fire making at Final 4 in Panama, and it takes a surprise Final 2 instead of Final 3 where she would have won over Parvati and Amanda. I don't care what anybody says. She wins that.
I agree with you. I do think she wins that. It comes down to that Alexis vote, and I think she gets it.
Yep. And if 2 people get injured instead of 3, it's a final 3, and Suri wins that season. And Amanda and Parvati were willing to take her that far. So, yeah, this has to be Suri. And I don't think you can make an argument otherwise, even though Dee and Kyle were both great in their new era games.
Yeah. I feel like when a lot of people think of Suri, they think a lot of her playing as the master strategist. They think about her coming up with the idea of Eric passing the immunity necklace. But since we're covering Panama right now, that's the season that reminded me like how great Suri is at playing from the bottom as well, because she's on the outside of the original Kasaya tribe, and she still convinces that group to vote out their strongest physical competitor in the first tribal council of the season. She's also on the bottom of the swap Kasaya that we all remember today, and she's able to finesse her way into the middle. Like, I feel like you can put Suri really into any spot in Survivor, and she'll find a way to make it to the end. And it doesn't matter what happens in the like challenge side of the game, because she's not going to win a challenge anyway. She's going to socially position herself to make a deep run. I do want to get your opinion though. Which Suri run would you say was her best?
Oh, fans' favorites, and it's not close in my opinion.
I think I agree. I think I'd say fans' favorites 1, then Panama, then Game Changers, then Heroes versus Villains, just because it was so short.
I think that's the correct order. I in my opinion, like, look, Suri has the human arc, right? She almost has the Emily Flippin arc in her first season, because it goes from I'm an outcast, I'm not going to make it. Now all of a sudden I'm a badass and I'm making things happen, and she gets 4th place. And people don't talk about Terry much anymore. But you were talking about earlier, Ozzy's the best challenge competitor, and I don't think it's close. I think Terry actually gives him a run for his money. I think Terry's the one that you can make the argument with him. And I think Suri and Terry being on the same season is a very fascinating thing, because you have maybe the best physical player and maybe the best strategic player in the history of Survivor, and neither one of them win, right? Neither one of them win the season. That's amazing. And so I feel like fans versus favorites, what she's able to do from day one, how she just takes control and takes control and takes control. And she had a target on her back, and she just navigates that game so well. And if it's a final 3, she wins. I think what she does with Eric, I think the blind side of Ozzy, she's just in control of everything. And every time she feels that something's swaying, she gets it back. And then I think Panama is amazing, but I think Panama is a little bit more of a story, because you get the 3 Lamina boots, and then it's Terry, but then Bruce gets medevaced. So then Suri doesn't have to play the game after the Melinda boot until final 6. And that's when she makes arguably the greatest move in the history of Survivor with the 3-2-1 vote to get Courtney out of the game. But she doesn't win. So really we don't see Suri play for a large majority of the post-merge and the end of the pre-merge there in Survivor Panama. In fans versus favorites, she never turns it off.
Yeah. I think she should be people's number 1. I feel like the only argument people really make against her, well, the 2 main ones are physical side of the game. If you're someone that really values challenges, you could say Suri would never make it to the end because she can't win a challenge to save her life. And the fact that she's not a winner. Some people would just say, the winners have to be at the top of this list. I don't stand by that sentiment, but I would understand it.
I agree with that. And I think that's where I thought maybe you would go with Dee or Kyle, but at the end of the day, it just has to be. She's just bigger. And it's not just that she's a bigger name. She's just a better play. The fact that she makes Game Changers Final Six is crazy.
Yeah. Like, I don't think Cirie will win 50. I would say she's probably, like, honestly, I think the three least likely people to win 50 might be Kyle, D, and Cirie, even though they're the best players. Yeah. But if any of them do win, I think it lends to some really, really interesting all-time conversations, especially for Cirie. If Cirie wins, you'll get so many top 10 all-time Survivor player videos going up on YouTube. A lot of people claiming that she's the GOAT if she wins it.
If she wins it, she probably knocks Parvati off, which is going to blow people's minds of the Rushmores, because I think it would be Tony, Boston Rob, Cirie, and Sandra.
Really? Okay. I'm trying to think. I made a video on the Mount Rushmore, and I think I had the consensus one that everybody has right now. Cirie's not on mine, but it's hard to because she hasn't won.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If she wins 50, I think she would boot Parv. Because I don't think that that's the Rushmore of Survivor, right? But I get why it is. So that's just how I talk about it. I mean, look, those might not be the Rushmore of presidents either, but that's who's on Rushmore. So it's like, who would you replace? Whatever. So it's the four that are the general consensus are Parvati, Tony, Sandra, Boston Rob. I think Cirie winning would knock.
You think she would boot Parv out of all people? I feel like Parvati's like iconicness has like extended beyond just Survivor at this point. I think she might hold on to her spot just based on the fact that
and then Cirie wouldn't get there though, because you're not going to boot either of the two-time winners, and Boston Rob is still to this day. I mean, that's who people think of first when they think of Survivor.
Yeah, it'll make some way more interesting conversations, because I feel like now that Mount Rushmore is so consensus.
It's not going to happen, though. Cirie, D, Kyle. And again, that's what we're talking about. We're talking player rankings. We're not talking ranking how likely they are to win, because, look, I said it earlier. Tiffany should take it as a compliment that I put her at 22, because that might mean that she has a better chance to win the season.
Yeah. Do you have a winner pick right now? I didn't ask you that.
Devins is actually who I think has the best chance to win.
Okay. I have a hesitant Charlie, but I haven't locked it in with the video yet. But that's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, we did our like I said, for Patreon, which comes out tomorrow, we did our boot order game, and I didn't pick Devins, but that was mainly because when people listen to it, they'll hear what I say, where I have this crazy scheme and reason why Devins gets fourth place, and then the winner is the winner. But Devins is who I've been going to, because I feel like his threat level is a little bit lower than people think. Yes, he gets a lot of screen time, but he's really sociable. He's going to be on an 8-person tribe to start. There's probably going to be a tribe swap, because I'm assuming we voted one in. That'll probably happen around final 18. So he'll be on a 6-person tribe. Maybe he gets to it. But I feel like Devins is always in something here. So I like his chances. Okay. So that's what I'm going. And he's a player that if he gets to the end, he gets the votes. And he's got a good story and all of that. But he's not Cirie or D or Kyle or Christian, who you're saying, I cannot let this person get the final 3 because I cannot beat them. He doesn't have that same aura, even though maybe he should.
I do like the pick, though. I think it's a solid one. When the cast was initially announced, I highly considered picking Tiffany just because her threat level is so low. But I feel like the Tiffany pick is almost too common now, where I wouldn't even get any satisfaction out of it. Where if Tiffany wins the season, I'm just on the bandwagon. It just wouldn't hit the same, at least for me.
I agree with that. And look, I mean, I have Aubrey at number 4 here. You have Aubrey. I actually think Aubrey is one of the women with the best chances to win. So even though our top 3 here, I don't think they can win. I think Aubrey has one of the best chances out of any of the women, because I don't think Camilla has a good chance. I don't think Genevieve has a good chance. I don't think Cirie or D have a good chance. So when I start looking, I'm like, maybe Aubrey has the best chance out of all the women to win. Because Tiffany, I think, has a little bit too small of a target on her back, that she'd have to sit next to the right people and really dominate the game to win. Which on this cast, I don't know if she can do that.
That's fair. Man, I'm happy we got through all 22, though. Look at that. Only took, 2 hours and 22 minutes.
I told my wife, I was like, I'll be done at 8:30. And then we got done with dinner. And she's like, so you'll be done at 9:30? I'm like, no, 8:30. I hope it's not 9:30. And here we are, 9:31. And we're wrapping up. So well done to us. What's going on with you? What are you doing? Where can people find you? Tell everyone.
Yes, you can find us, Survivor Analytics. We're on TikTok, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, our main platforms. Over the summer, we do a throwback podcast. So we're covering Survivor Panama, going through every single episode. The way that our podcast works is that I'm the true expert. I've seen every season, as you can probably tell based on the conversations that we've had. And I co-host it with my buddy Jack, who has only seen the seasons that we've covered on the podcast. So whether you're a new a viewer of Survivor or you've been watching for 20 years, you get both perspectives there. So we're covering Panama on the podcast. On TikTok, I do a bunch of rankings. And on top of that, I'm releasing a series now where every Wednesday I'm going through every final tribal council in the history of the show and talking about who I would vote for if I sat on the jury. So I released the first 10 seasons last week. I think I disagreed with 3 of the winners, I want to say, and I'm doing seasons 11 through 20 coming out this Wednesday. So exciting stuff on the horizon.
Love it. All right. Well, that's exciting. Hi, Roddy Garcia here. Phil, can we talk about the host of Australian Survivor? Jonathan LaPaglia is out, but that's not what this podcast is. Look, and for anybody who is a patron, I said this in the episode that's coming out tomorrow, but I pre-recorded my Australian Survivor episode, so I'm not going to be talking about the Jonathan LaPaglia thing until July 18th. So sorry, but I didn't get it in. So if you're like, wait, Phil, you're being weird on the 4th and the 11th. Well, I pre-recorded because I'm at my parents' house for the holiday, so I didn't want to do it while I was here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Again, become a patron, patreon.com/thespecialist. We're covering heroes versus villains for Every Season Matters, which is for top tier patrons. And they'll be diving into Nicaragua next. Big announcement with Tegwith coming up involving the Patreon. That's going to be coming out soon. So get ready for that. Tegwith and I are talking tomorrow. So you'll get some more news on that if you want to become a patron over there. In terms of what we're doing here, if you haven't checked out our recasting with Mike Bloom from last week, go check that out. It was only part 1. It was the old schoolers. We're going to be doing part 2 either next week or the week after. We haven't decided yet. We got a Brant Steele coming up soon, too. We're going to be Brant Steele in Survivor 50. Whenever the tribes get announced, we'll be doing that podcast. And in the interim here, tomorrow, we're going to have our defining episode for Camilla coming out. That series we've been doing where we've been going back and forth between all of the players who are on their season and what their defining episode is. So 2 players per week. This week, it's Camilla and Sari. So we'll get the Sari final 6 of Panama coming out on Friday. And then we're also doing everything you need to know about, which on Monday we threw out Genevieve. Will finally got involved on the mix. So that was Monday. And then on Thursday, it'll be Tiffany. So stay tuned for all that. I hope you guys are enjoying those series. It's fun little like homework stuff, right? About get ready for Survivor 50. That's what it's all about. Follow us on social media, Instagram, TikTok too. We don't have quite Clyde's numbers over there, but you know, one can dream. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Let us know who you think the best player is. If you agree with our rankings, if you disagree, why Stephanie is not the 6th best player on this season. And that's it. There you go, Clyde. I have to give you a dig right at the end.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm used to it. It's fine.
But thank you all. It was a pleasure, Clyde, and we'll see you next time.